Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Metandi Mudise, Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Honorable Dadedes van Rooyen, Minister of State Security, Honorable David Mahlobo, Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, responsible for Traditional Affairs, Honorable Obed Bapela, Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, responsible for Cooperative Governance, Honorable Ndade Andries Nel, Deputy Minister for Tourism, Honorable Kasa, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, Honorable Dr. Matole Mutsecha, Deputy Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Inkosi Mahlangu, the founding Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Kosi Victor Simani Shuping, our veteran traditional leader, our elder, who is also a member of parliament and a leader of eNCA Freedom Party, Sheng. Members of portfolio and select committees present, you are all welcome. Distinguished guests, allow me to pace through this to acknowledge the following MEC Makurupechi from Limpopo Province, MEC Kasa from Eastern Cape Province, members of the National House of Traditional Leaders, chairpersons of provincial houses of traditional leaders and your deputies, President of Contralesa, Hoshi Sitlamuraku Tobejane, chairperson of the National Khoisan Council, Mr. Cecil Lefrey, heads of representatives or representatives of political parties present, Director General of the Department of Traditional Affairs, Dr. Charles Nwaila, Director General in the Presidency, Dr. Liwisi, HOD for Kokta in Free State Provincial Government, Mr. Duma, mayors present. We also have in our midst heads or representatives of Chapter 9 institutions as follows. Chairperson of the Municipal Demarcation Board, Mayor Jane Tupana, Chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, Mr. Mashinini, Deputy Chairperson of CRL Rights Commission, Professor Musoma, and representatives from business and other sectors such as the following: the World Vision South Africa, Medical Research Council, Ingoma Forum, Samsung Electronics South Africa, and others who are not in the list. You are most welcome as well. Representative of the faith-based organization and traditional healers, ladies and gentlemen, Pula Elunele. You are all warmly welcome. Your presence is appreciated indeed. And our guests in the gallery, you also welcome. All the Khoisan leaders who are here, everybody welcome. As I said earlier, this session has been convened to debate the President's speech delivered to the National House on the 3rd of March. This debate has been extended to members of provincial houses, the leadership of Contralesa, represented by Koshi Tobejane, and National Koi and Sun Council, represented by Chairperson Lefleur, as structures which participated during the preparations for this debate. It is not humanly and practically possible to have each and every one of us in this chamber to speak, as we believe that the views of the people on the ground are represented and well articulated by their leaders. The key rules of engagement are as follows. A speaker will speak only when recognized by the chair, and that no speaker must be interrupted. Since the engagement is with the President, the debate will not only focus on what the President mentioned in the speech, but on issues affecting the institution of traditional leadership in general. I will now move forward and recognize speakers to debate the speech. May I now call upon the Deputy Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders to give us general introductory remarks. Nzunza, please address us on the matter.
Ngiyathokoza mgcini sihlalo ithuba unginikela lona angithome ngokulotshisa umongameli weSouth Africa ubaba uJG Zuma abongqongqotshe abakhona ngaphakathi ingwenyama namkha abajamele ingwenyama ngaphakathi amakhosi wonke uChairperson we-National Council of Provinces abosekela ngqongqotshe beminyango ehlukileko abangaphakathi umongameli weContralesa ubaba uThobejane amalunga ahloniphekileko wendlu le yobuholi bendabuko intatanyiswa zethu ezikhona la ngaphakathi kulendlu vane sithi nasilochisako ngesikhethu wonke umuntu simbese ngengubo yinye sithi indaba ezitha ngoba bonke abantu abangaphakathi kubantu abekosi abakhona ngaphakathi kwendlu le. Honorable President, on the 3rd of March during the opening of this August House, the President raised many important issues, and I want to take this opportunity as mandated by my chairperson to introduce this debate of the speech that was delivered by the Honorable President, His Excellency J.G. Zuma. Honorable President, you reminded us of the sinking of the SS Mendi, during which our soldiers perished and met their untimely deaths. We are strengthened by the wind of remembrance currently taking place for those who sacrificed for this country. The centenary of the sinking of the troopship, the SS Mendi, in which more than 600 black soldiers perished on their way to the First World War, it informs us that black people were coerced to fight during the First World War. We paid tribute to our soldiers, and we shall never forget the demise they faced. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was looking at matters of people who were affected by apartheid. However, the soldiers who fought in the First and Second World War were not considered. No research, to the best of our knowledge, that was conducted to check if those soldiers went to war voluntarily or by force. The National House of Traditional Leaders suggests that the families of black soldiers who fought during the First and Second World War be remunerated accordingly. The families of those soldiers ought to receive some sort of recognition or compensation, and we know that this government is always trying its best to recognize such, but we plead that more could be done. It should be noted that some of those who participated in that war were only given codes, amateurs, as part of their remuneration. Yes, indeed, Honorable President, structures of traditional leadership have been established in all provinces, and an assessment of their functionality of these structures is critical to ascertain whether these structures are operating at the level at which they are expected to do so. The National House of Traditional Leaders, working with provincial houses, is supposed to develop means and ways to intervene and assist those structures of traditional leaders found not to be functional. But the question, Honorable President, that has been lingering on many traditional leaders' minds, especially those that have gone to these different traditional councils, and those that always face the hardships in these structures. We have often asked a question, Honorable President, that as we transform these structures when we establish them, are we establishing them for the sake of compliance with what is there in the legislation, or are we establishing or transforming them for the sake of improving service delivery in our own areas? Are we establishing them and transforming them to allow them space to evolve, or it is just for compliance? I think what brings this, Honorable President, is that during the assessment, when you talk to different employees of traditional councils, most of them don't get paid, are volunteering in those traditional councils. If some of them are paid, you still find people that are paid 300 rands a month, of which is way below what we say is a minimum living wage in this country. And most of them would ask us a question that we see that as some of the members of this institution fought for this democracy that we are in, and some of us as employees of those traditional councils participated in the war against apartheid, but we are not sure if we've seen this democracy that we fought for. Traditional councils ought to be properly budgeted for. The Department of Traditional Affairs is not adequately coordinating the province as a result of under-resourcing. The department should be funded as the implementer and also to adequately resource traditional councils. Their coordination by the department must ensure that at provincial level, there is a branch at least responsible for managing the institution so that provincial structures are synchronized with the National Department of Traditional Affairs. We are of the view that traditional councils must and should be given a sufficient standard performance grant in terms of their operations for such to be fully functional. We know that we are operating within limited resources, but I think if we believe that a traditional council is one of those democratic structures that are supposed to help the rural people, we ought to do everything in our powers to fund them and make sure that we operationalize them. We need to give them space to evolve. We believe that as the institution, we have not done enough to give traditional councils space to evolve, to be able to do what they ought to do. The Framework Act provides for the functions of traditional councils. It also calls on 26 departments, Honorable President, to confer functions to the institution. We request that the President must request all these departments, especially the ministers in this department, of which we were hoping, and I think we've done a lot, even with our Honorable Minister, to try and extend an invitation to these departments to be part of us during the opening of the House and during the debates. Because when we engage the President believes in his department. And I remember at some stage when the President said, Bonda Bezita, some of the answers are not with me, but are with the ministers. You're going to see action from these ministers. But their absence in these gatherings, President, is just too sakancane as the institution, because they ought to be working very close with us to make sure that they do what the President requests them to do, because the President has asked many questions. The President has made many commitments, of which those commitments can only be achieved through the implementation by those respective departments. The functions ought to provide synergy to the work of the municipalities. We need to work very closely with the municipalities. We know that there's different prescripts that are calling for a closer working relationship with the institution of traditional councils. As we look at the relationship between traditional councils and municipalities, I think issues of budgets needs to be looked into. Some functions that are currently performed by municipalities, we believe, Honorable President, that if there is a good working relationship, because our Framework Act calls for memorandum of understandings that are supposed to be entered into between municipalities and traditional councils. Those memorandum of understandings could involve some of the functions being performed by traditional councils, because we've seen if there is no good working relationship, I think people always find a gap. If they don't want to pay services to the municipality, they would say, "I no spatale nkosini." Then mauye nkosini, bafike nkosini bathi, "I no skhoka kwamasipala." So because they know ukuthi these two structures are not necessarily talking to each other as they ought to. So we need to strengthen the MOUs that we ought to be entering into with the municipalities. We are pleased, President, as you had mentioned in your speech, that for the first time, traditional leaders participated in the councillor induction program. This has assisted many traditional councils and also municipalities to start finding each other, to start understanding each other's different roles. And I'm hoping that with this induction program, possibly the MOUs that we are to enter into would be informed by that understanding. It is proposed that the institution of traditional leadership should have the following support in case we will only mention those sticking points for the President to note and direct that his cabinet attends to if agreed. We reiterate our call for the representation and participation and closer working with us and the National Council of Provinces. And we are happy that the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces is here. There are proposals that the institution is making where we request that we participate within the NCOP as part-time delegates to assist on issues of customs, culture, and the rural communities in the NCOP. The participation of traditional leaders would be like that of SALGA within the National Council of Provinces. This will be to complement of the participation of traditional leaders in lawmaking processes. We have seen some pieces of legislation that have been said that they do not pass constitutional muster on the basis that there has not been proper consultation, either there has been wrong tagging of those pieces of legislation. So we think that by us being closer to the National Council of Provinces, we should be able to assist in that front. We should also be able to assist in terms of public participation, especially for those people that are in rural areas. An inherent requirement for the institution to participate as per the provision of the Constitution. Engagement on the powers of the functions of traditional leaders should be protected by the Constitution. We know that some political parties have indicated that the amendment of the Constitution is a pipe dream, but we need such amendments which will cover the land issue as well as the powers and functions of traditional leaders. So we can call upon the unity of African political parties to unite on this matter and yield a 2/3 majority to amend the Constitution. Let us allow the dreamers to dream because it comes naturally. However, the amendment of the Constitution is the way to go, and it will happen. We'll engage on the matter so as to find finality on this issue. We are of the view that the development of rural areas so as to create employment opportunities in rural areas is paramount. The approach by the Premier of the Northwest Province to dedicate 70% of the provincial spending to rural areas is a progressive that should be copied by other premiers. Let us attend to rural development and the emancipation of people in rural areas as a country. We feel that this fits very well with the President's call for a radical socio-economic transformation of rural areas. We continue to make a rallying call that the institution of traditional leadership as a whole should be resourced sufficiently for it to occupy its rightful place in the constitutional democracy. At the moment, the institution is seriously underfunded. The current situation is extremely dire. The dignity of the institution is at stake. Despite this underfunding, President, though, we want to say that we've tried as the institution to partner with different private sector companies to be able to bring the necessary required services. The President would remember that previously we've stated that clinics have been built in rural areas, IT centers have been built in rural areas. That came from the partnership that was there between the Institution of Traditional Leaders and organizations such as Samsung and others. So we'll continue doing that as the National House of Traditional Leaders. The National House has achieved a lot within the 20 years of its existence. It is not, though, about the National House of Traditional Leaders only. It is about the Institution of Traditional Leadership. There are a number of good things that have happened, and the institution appreciates such. However, there are those sticking points that need to be addressed, as we mentioned. Role played by Itwalandwe, Ubaba Oliver Reginald Tambo, and do support the ruling party on the declaration of 2017 as the year of O.R. Tambo. O.R. Tambo existed alongside the warriors of the nation, Amakos. It is O.R.'s vision that we are living today, wherein he hoped for a cooperative relation between government and Amakos. The President further requested us to debate many important issues in his address on the 3rd of March, especially issues that talk to radical economic transformation, issues that talk to land, issues that talk to immigration. But we've resolved, President, as the institution, that as we would engage this speech, but further inputs would be made from the dialogue that we're going to have as traditional leaders, where all 829 traditional leaders will participate, especially on the very important issue on land that the President has said we need to debate it as Amakosi. We need to bring all together to make sure that we speak with one voice when it comes to the issue of land. That dialogue, Honorable President, will be from the 28th of May to the 1st of June, where we'll engage with all these issues this year, just before let me not go further, Honorable President. So we will debate it on that day, Honorable President, and I'm sure resolutions that are going to come from that conference would be resolutions that would talk to the type of traditional council that we want to see, that will talk to the relationship that we're going to have between us and the municipalities, the issue of land, and all other issues that are affecting our rural communities. I therefore open the debate for other members to engage, Chair, on these important issues. I thank you.
Siyathokoza kakhulu Nzunza for the general introductory remarks. Let me now invite Inkosi Mavundla to kickstart and lead the debate on the radical socio-economic transformation. Mtimut.
Honorable Chairperson of the National House, His Excellency, the President of the country, Baba Msholozi, the Minister of our department present, Umlungu Mnyama, Des, Deputy Ministers present, the Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Members of Parliament present, the MECs present, Honorable Mtwana Inkosi Yakobuthelezi ekhona, ne-leader ye-political party, Deputy Chairperson of the National House, Chairpersons of provinces, Honorable Members of the National House, Khoisan leadership present, all DGs that are present, and all honorable guests that are here, I greet you today. Honorable President, let me bring to your attention that economic transformation has thus far failed to make a meaningful improvement to the quality of life of the rural poor majorities. To me, Honorable President, this clearly tells that for 20 years, our democracy or government has been trotting on poorly structured economy in relation to our rural areas. It seems as if there is a fear of the unknown by the captains of government and also the captains of industrial economy. I have a question, Honorable President. When it comes to radical transformation, has our government been able to check on capitalist investments? Has our government been able to check on interest-bearing accounts of white capitalists? Has our government been able to check on accounts of corporations? Has our government been able to check on all accounts of farmers? Has our government been able to check on all accounts of those who benefited in the earlier BEE? President, without the realistic, unbiased, and transparent economic radical transformation, this country will never be peaceful and prosperous. The skew, poor structured, and slow garden snail pace to economic transformation is a recipe for turmoil. Any ordinary person will agree that the economy must change. Rural people's lives must change. Asizenzanga msholosi, senziwa abacindezeli. Akungabenefithi abokufika. Akungabenefithi ifundiswa zodwa. Bese thina emakhaya sithola ama-grant nempesheni kuphela. The radical socio-economic transformation is in line with the provisions of the Constitution and will be characterized by radical policies and decisive action to effect socio-economic transformation. The Department of Trade and Industry has approved over 280 million rand for revitalizing of the. We are calling for provincial and municipalities to work with national government to revitalize black townships and rural economies so that those who have lost hope can regain hope in entrepreneurship. Black people were deliberately denied access to participate in the economy of this country and were left in the periphery, creating a wrong impression that blacks do not understand issues around the economy. The Department of Small Business should assist in creating the economic capacity of the rural communities. The African banking sector should be established, as you indicated in your speech, in our rural areas, and it must be supported so as to radically transform the economy, to grow the rural communities and black people who are in majority in this country, and we should use our majority to benefit us. Government must deliberately support black-led banks. Key structures and systems of the economy ought to be changed in favor of radical socio-economic transformation. We must radically transform and change the way in which the mining, infrastructure, farming, and banking sectors, amongst others, operate so that we directly change and program them to benefit black people. We must be straightforward about this matter. Government should completely stop awarding business opportunities to white capital and special black sector, and many shortage of scarce skills should be based on the forced joint ventures with black business and skills transfer that should be vigorously monitored. Industrialization of poor rural areas is greatly supported by us as an institution of traditional leadership. Traditional leaders will advise government to the industrials that should be revitalized in our areas. Another area of focus is on initiation as an economic opportunity to be tapped on. This usage of initiation as a catalyst for economic development should be well conceptualized to a very productive economic means of production. Initiation is an economic opportunity that can generate over 2 billion rand revenue per season. The initiation season can generate a lot of income on the following, Honorable President: cultural tourism, slaughtering of cows, blankets, goods, beds, and etc. Traditional leaders are yearning for radical government assistance and support in this regard. We reiterate our support to the fact that we need to change the economic structure and systems if we are to be radically about the economic transformation. Any change in the system of operation of traditional communities should not change the way of life, but to enhance the living conditions and socio-economic development. Policies should not be changed to weaponize the areas of traditional communities. The economic structure that must be changed is that one by white capital. We must address and attack it right on. The economic hubs in rural areas has the potential of creating socio-economic development opportunities. Honorable President, as far as I'm concerned, there is an immediate need and a dire need for the institution of traditional leadership to meet in one room with all your cabinet ministers so as to address issues that are going to develop this country and put things straight in order for the ruling government to stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mtimute, for kickstarting the debate on radical economic transformation. Let me also take the moment to welcome the MEC for Community Safety and Transport in the Northwest, Dr. Mutlabane, who is representing the Premier of the Northwest, Resupra Mahumapelo. Raho Amohela Mutlapin. Let me call upon the President of Contralesa to address the House on aspects of radical socio-economic transformation. Mwateo ya bauba. Tobe.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo wa ntlo ya bogoši Afrika Borwa. Ke tšea sebaka ke iša tlhompho go Mopresidente wa Republic ya Afrika Borwa Ntate Zuma mmogo le maloko a kabinete
Interruption,
ka ba
sorry.
gwana.
Just a minute, President. For English translation, please press 2 to all distinguished guests and members. You may proceed.
Ke a leboga motlotloi. Ke lemogile gore ba sa di khwerebetha motlotloi. Ke nyaka go ba tlogela. Thank you very much. Maloko a kabinete ba ba ka ba go ba le gona fa re ba hlomphe. Motlatsa modulasetulo wa ntlo ya bogoši nageng ya gešo ya Afrika Borwa. Baeng bagolwane ba leng gona fa bomme le bontate re rata go tliša tlhompho go lena mesong ya letšatši. Chairperson, it gives us pleasure to have this opportunity to reflect on the vision of the government of the Republic of South Africa through His Excellency President Jacob Zuma. Chair, we should not hide that this discussion is not of its first kind. We had similar debates past, and there are issues that require us to be, reminded that they've been packed, and if any very little have been done to its attention. Amongst other, Chair, all of us, we are aware that when the colonizers chattered in South Africa, people that suffered most were the Khoi, the San, and the Nam. They were the first victims of the settlers when they settled in South Africa. And to date, as we are talking, Chair, very little we have done to restore the dignity of the Khoi, the San, and the Nam. It is something that we need to fast track so that we cannot continue to remind part of ourselves about the ugly of colonization and apartheid. We are calling on our government to fast track as fast as you can to make sure that there is a legislation that will recognize the existence of the leadership of the Khoi, the San, and the Nam in South Africa. We cannot wait beyond what we have waited. 22 years is enough, President, to make sure that the dignity of our people have to be restored with immediate effect. We will be doing that in the spirit of equality before the eyes of our government. We need to be seen that none of our nationalities believe they are not important, they are not human beings like others. We want to see that all our kings equally are treated equally. Those will be the foundation of building an equality in South Africa, because it is through these leaders of our nations that when we were deprived of our humanity, they were the ones to suffer most. Today, we have got a responsibility as a nation to restore the dignity of our leaders, and in particular the kings who have suffered under the colonizers, under the apartheid. It cannot be correct that they should continue to suffer under our own democratic dispensation. Building of the capacity of our institution, President, should be on the center. As long as we know that apartheid belittled us by giving us Bantu education, and Bantu education did not prepare us for the leadership position, President. We need to benefit out of this government and make sure that our capacity are built across the board in order to respond to the responsibility of improving the lives of our people. It is this institution of traditional leadership, President, that before the settlers, it was regarded and recognized as governance on its own. And to date, the status of the institution have been diminished. And our role as democratic government is to restore the dignity of this institution and make this institution to be respected. Without restoring the dignity of this institution, President, it will be difficult to speak rural economic development. Rural economic development has to be driven and led by the very same, institution which their capacity is questionable as of today. We need to do everything in our powers to make sure that our leaders are better off to understand our laws, are better off to understand the Constitution, are better off to understand the needs of our people. Our people should always be our, pillars. The existence of the institution is solely based on the will of the people. We are where we are because we have got people behind us. There is this say in Sepedi, President, which said, "Shakola hloka thobela ke mojano." When there is no leadership, you are going to perish. You will never have, things that you wanted to have. And we thought if we are to say, after democratic dispensation, there are things that we require to understand better. There are laws that we have passed that have to be followed when we execute our responsibility. All those particular laws needs ourselves to understand them better. Therefore, we are saying build the capacity of the institution. It requires a sufficient budget to be invested in that particular area. We cannot continue to see ourselves operating under, I'm not even going to mention a figure because the figure is very little that it totally becomes irrelevant for the institution. The institution requires millions for it to operate sufficiently. We need to be better off than where we are as of today. As of today, I would give an example. Many of our institutions are operating under little 2 million. And when you operate with that little kind of money, obviously you become a white elephant. You will never, reach the level of people that are expecting you to operate and advise them and lead them towards, a better life. President, issues relating to agriculture, the agricultural park, agricultural processing, and related stuff. It requires a mammoth responsibility from government. Government should see to it that it empowers the rural communities to make sure that they take the issue of agriculture into their own hands. It cannot be correct that every time we speak of agriculture, we are referring to the wide, agricultural communities. We need to change that mindset, President. Obviously, our people, with the little land they do have, we must make sure that we invest in those land. We supply them with the necessary funds. We supply them with the necessary, irrigation scheme. We supply them with the sufficient officials that will help our traditional communities to, take leadership on the issues of agriculture. We are the one who are suffering out of the poverty that we are saying we need to address. But we can't address poverty, President, if the issue of agriculture are neglected, are taken for granted, are not on the center of, our way of doing things. We need to be. Therefore, when we are talking a rural development, it should not be about the books. It should be about reality, where our people start feeling that government is doing something to change the lives of, previously disadvantaged communities. Our culture in diversity, President, should be part of, increasing our economy. Our culture, if it properly be promoted, recognized by our, spheres of government across the board, and then given the necessary recognitions and support to an extent that when, President, you are moving around the world promoting South Africa, culture should not be left behind. You should have leaders of this institution who will join you, move along with yourself, selling our culture to the world to say we are better off. Our culture and custom are the most important thing. The reason why we've been safe without, military support, without police, it is because within it, the culture of respect is embodied in it. We are saying our people should learn to respect one another. Respect is a key. With respect, you would know that you don't need police, you don't need security to look after you. You will use respect to protect yourself and live in harmony amongst yourselves. Therefore, it is something that we should sell across the world and try to change, including the world itself, to say, let's stop killing one another. Respect for human life will remain a key to build South Africa, to build the world for all of us to live in harmony. The revitalizations, as my colleague Inkosi Mavuso have said, that we need to, Mabundla, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, my colleague. the issue of revitalizations of the rural industrialization, President, it's a key. We need to make sure that industrializations that were established during apartheid, which today, as we are talking, are white elephant, are bushes, are doing nothing, need to be, revived in a way that, and make them to become key to make sure that those industrializations are producing things that are required. We have been discussing amongst ourselves to say, if government can support the rural communities by making sure that traditional leaders are mobilized in their communities to become, to bring women who will start, developing uniforms at school so that we don't just go to town in a white monopoly capital to buy a mere uniform that it can be, produced and developed by our own people. We do that, and we encourage that each local community become responsible for the uniform of the schools around their areas. You will see that the economy of that particular locality will change and change for a better, and all of us will benefit out of that. We are saying the issue relating to the mine, President. The mines are, at a high level, they look to be a highest, economic spin-off in South Africa. But the fact of the matter is, who benefited out of the mines? How many of our people are benefiting out of that? Who is processing the minerals that we are producing? We take raw material out of the country, coming back, we buy with, the prices that we were not supposed to. We are saying this government should start making sure that it helps our communities to say, you build, an industry that will make sure that mineral get processed within our locality. We cannot forever become the beneficiary of the dust of the mining while the real production is not our benefits. We need to benefit out of the real production and polish everything, and we sell from that particular level. We shouldn't be seen, our responsibility being that we are fighting for the dust, we are, the mines themselves are not coordinated, they're becoming, a chaos, they're sidelining our communities. Our communities are not, feeling owning their mines, that they
bills and bills and bills, but come to the rural areas with development, as it is said, it's rural development. So we are really looking forward to the development in our communities. As we try to promote social cohesion among our communities, we plead to all leaders in various institutions to instill social cohesion within their institutions so as to be exemplary to the nation. So it's so important that when we go down to the people, we must go down united. We must go down being built up. We cannot say we are building the nation when I still want to be built myself. So it should start from us, and then we convey that to our communities. The lack of funding, is depriving us to reach the important aspect of traditional leadership in our areas. Laphaya phansi kunabo mama bakomkhulu. Those people are the people who could play a pivotal role in building the nation, in social cohesion, because they are always there with the people. They are always there amongst people. When men are running around to izimbizo, to izinkundla, and then they are with people there. So they really need capacitation. They need to be capacitated in order to play this role amongst the community. Houses of traditional leaders must develop a mechanism to attend to the disputes within the institution of traditional leadership. at present, we are aware that the disputes are being dealt with by the commission. So one day, we are aware that the commission will not be there. It's very important that traditional leaders are capacitated so that they will be able to take over this function of attending to the disputes amongst themselves. The Department of Traditional Affairs should also provide capacity building also to royal families so that they understand their role within the institution of traditional leadership. Mr. President, you indicated that crime has become too high in some areas in the country and that we must work together to end crime. Freedom does not mean freedom to do crime, but to be a good citizen. Indeed, we support the assertion that our people cannot coexist with crime. Drug trafficking, human trafficking, hijackings, robbery, rape, and all other horrible crimes. The securities cluster, and in particular the South African Police Services, must be strengthened to fight this. I would like to thank the President for visiting the border whereby our cars have been hijacked and then they cross the border. We are pleading, we are happy that we have gone there, maybe it will have to make a change. But we are pleading that security needs to be strengthened at the borders. Yesterday over the news, you could see that there are policemen who were arrested at the borders for bribing 150 rands, 200 rands. You see such a small amount of money, but then they were arrested. So we are pleading that there should be strict measures at the borders so that we live in harmony in our country. I also like to touch about back to basics. You know, when this back to basics, we heard about this back to basics, it's a good and a nice thing. But then I think it has not come properly to the traditional leaders, whereby we have not had inkundla, sihlale phansi njengamakhosi, ukusho ukuthi if we talk of the basics, this is what we mean. We need to do this and this and this so that it will assist in the nation building. Kungabi nje back to basics emlonyeni sikhuluma kuphela. Kodwa sazi ukuthi uma sithi back to basics, what are our basics? I think, Mr. President, let me rest there. Thank you.
Siyabonga Ndabezitha for introducing the topic on nation building and social cohesion. To further debate on the matter is our Deputy Chairperson in the Free State House, Khosikgadi Moroka Tolo.
Ke a reboga Motshwaramarapo modulasetulo wa ntlo ya dikgosi, ntlokgolo ya dikgosi, ra rona mo Afrika Borwa, ma-Afrika Borwa, Motlotlegi President Zuma, honorable ministers and deputies, Speaker of the National Assembly, our DG, Chair of the National House and the Deputy, Makhosi a tlotlegang, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. To add on what Nkosi Dube has reiterated, Honorable President, in your speech in February, you made mention of government spending a lot of money on dispute cases taken to courts. It is true and it won't stop for as long as in some instances, correct procedures prescribed in the statutes are not followed before any dispute can be referred to the Commission. The National House has been contemplating the issue of establishing a structure or a committee of elders to serve and advise as a reference point of wisdom. There are many elder traditional leaders who can or could provide the necessary much needed support to the institution and government. However, the funding for such a forum of elders remain a challenge. We appreciate our country being open to other nationalities, but we should not deny the fact that some foreign nationals perform crimes which never existed in our communities, and we fail to address them. There are other people who come to South Africa deliberately to take advantage of the country and are pleading, and we are pleading for the respect of the laws of the country. Visitors should behave in a manner that is acceptable to the communities in which they reside and should integrate themselves with locals rather than living separately in a community, like it is happening in most of our areas. We are participating actively in the development of the policy on international migration so that we address the challenges experienced in this regard. We appreciate our country being open to other nationalities. Okay, I follow. There are other people who come to South Africa. We are proposing that government, in particular, the Department of Home Affairs, must review the acquisition of the South African citizenship by foreigners dating as back as 1994. We suspect that some foreign nationals gained South African citizenship through scrupulous means, especially before the professionalization of the Department of Home Affairs. So we are asking for a review, and if people are found to have gained such improperly, they should be deprived of the status. In the past, Honorable President, we used to know almost all people in our communities. And even those who come to visit used to report to the traditional council officers. But nowadays, we see a great number of new faces in our villages, of which some are even frightening. By just looking at you, you see crime written on their faces. Government has received complaints that it must improve its border management to curb illegal migration. It is dangerous not to know who is in the country, for what purpose, and for how long. South Africa, like all other countries of the world, does not encourage or freely allows illegal migration. South Africa has made progress in establishing Border Management Authority, which will be responsible for border law enforcement. We must demonstrate that South Africa is not a banana republic. I thank you.
Ra go leboga morolong. To conclude on the topic, social cohesion and nation building, as our review member of the National House, Inkosikazi Mhlawuli Radebe.
Ngihlale ngaphambili kwendlu yenkosi, ikumkani zonke, mongameli welizwe, abalingani bam sebe baqwalasela bonke abantu abafanele ukuqwalaselwa apho konga ixesha. Mandibulele elithuba ndilifumanayo lokokuba nam ke ndixoxe kwintetho ethe yadala nqa ngumongameli
mhla xa ebethetha nathi apha kanye kule ndlu. Mna ndizawungena kanye on the issues concerning HIV and AIDS and other issues. Kodwa phambi koko ndiyakuqwalaselisa into ethi ezona zinto zibalulekileyo kuthi ukufumana i-resources, izinto zokusincedisa emsebenzini sibubukhosi. We are doing a lot, but we need more resources. In National House or international leadership is there to advise the government. We are here to advise and also to assist in the implementation, working together with departments as required by Section 20 of Act 41, 2003. On the issues of HIV and AIDS, now we are talking about HIV and AIDS, TB and STIs. Izifo, nezifo zephepha, nezifo ezosulelayo ngazangaphantsi, sizihlanganisile kwimiba HIV and AIDS. Indlu yenkosi ke nobukhosi bonke buyathabatha inxaxheba, we are participating in all programs. For instance, tomorrow we'll be launching the National Strategic Plan on HIV and AIDS for 2017 and 2020. We are participating there. The National House has got its own plan. Nasezantsi emakhosini kuyasetyenzwa. Kodwa iyona nto ndifuna ukuyithetha ndingabhekisanga nje kumongameli welizwe yedwa, talking to everybody's here. We have got types of people. There are those who make things happen. There are those who assist those who make things happen. But there are those who don't even know there is something happening. Abanye abazi nje noba into yenzekayo, abanye benje into zenzeka, abanye abazi noba into zenzeka, noba into yenzekile. But ndizocela, asking each and everybody who is here to assist the nation ukusikhusela ekufeni yi-TB. TB is killing us. So wonke umuntu olapha sicela abuye lemva ajonge isifo se-TB. Usihlanganise ne-cancer, usihlanganise neswekile. Kukhona iphulo ekuthiwa ngu-1990. They are referring ukuthi if apha we have got 10 people who are living with HIV and AIDS, but they don't know their status. Let's try by all means that 9 of them by 2030, they know their status. By 2030 again, let's try that those who know their status, they are on treatment. Also, at the same time, those who are on treatment, the viral load is suppressed. Let's fight for that together. There's a program on Shikongas, which is focusing on girls and young women, because kubonakele ukuthi infection is high from girls and young women, that is 15 years up to 25 years. Now, the government and other partners are focusing on that one. Now, we need to work together, assisted by our partners, and also sihlanganise our resources to fight that. Just for your own information, we have got HIV high infections. Each year, in fact, each week, we have got 1,975 new infections. That's a time bomb for us. Unwanted pregnancies per year. talking about girls under 18 years, is 70 babies. 70,000 babies. That is alarming. That is also a time bomb. Because we are talking about the youth, the future of the country. Also the issue of high school dropout. Abantwana bahleli abaya ezikolweni. But into ethando yasothusa thina Eastern Cape sihlalo ukuthi but xa sesijonga the entire number ye school dropouts, it's not, majority, it's not girls, it's boys. Vice versa. That needs more efforts. There are also issues of sexual and gender-based violence, which are increasing each and every day. Thina singomama namantombazana, so sizoyika nje ukuhamba elizweni lethu. Apho sibone khona when we were given a report by the Department of Justice, ukuthi abantwana bethu, they are involved in cases, which is also alarming. Abana 10 years, from 10 years up to 14 years. They are involved in cases like rape. That is true, rape. Intercourse with minors. Yes, what is bad there? The language. They are appreciating nature. What is that? Really? Each language, they are appreciating nature. Umntwana ona 10 years. Nangu esenza loo nto ayenza nto ekubika nebiza ngegama. Kuthiwa they are appreciating nature. And nansi ubiza umntwana uthi ubusenzani, yintoni wayibona phi le? Usho ukuthi appreciating nature. That is indlela esiphila ngayo, izinto nabasilungisa abantwana. Abanye, no, le crime bayenza abanye public violence, possession of drugs. Assaults ngabantwana from 10 years to 14 and endithetha ngabo. So we need to look at that as the country. Uba sakha abantu abanjani, which means the girl child ikwi-risk again. Because ngoba omama bereyitshwa ngootata babo abantwana abana 10 years, abantwana bontombazana azawureyitshwa ngaba bantwana ngabanyana babo nabazukulwana babo. It means that xa beqala bena 10 years to attempt rape, thina sohlala singabantu bokureyitshwa. So but we suggested as the house ukuthi nangona kuthiwa i-criminal capacity yabo iqala ku-12 years ukubonakala umntwana le nto uyenze eyazi. But kubonakala ukuthi thina apha eSouth Africa sithi baqala ku-10 kuthiwa manyusa ithi 12. But thina sithi there must be programs dealing with those 10 years. Singalindi babade bafike phaa bakuthiwe bana 12 years. Kuninzi ke into as a moral regeneration. We are happy that our leaders are there. Amakhosi moral regeneration movement, because it's dealing with those issues kanye kuba kukho phaya necawa. Apha khona soko sithethe because ke xa sihlangene phaya kulapho imakhosi azokabuze ke nalapha ezicaweni ba hey hayi noko kaloku ngoku kukho ezinye into singaziqondi apha ezicaweni ezenzekayo. Ezike bekumane kuthethwa ngazo na ku-media engazuthetha ngazo mna. But also women are ngabo kanye victims there. Basithetha nangeza ucawe kuba kaloku thina we are fighting for our families. Uba kuthiwa nansi icawe noba yenzani na iza kusinceda ukuphila umntwana wakho okanye kubuye umuntu wakho umyeni wakho ngekhoyo okanye kuwenzeke nantoni ungumama uzawuya phaya. We are always victims because we are protecting our families. Sizilweleni ke singabizwa victims zabo bantu. Kuyafana namagqirha nawo who are using i-parts zabantwana bethu, that is albinism. Abantwana bethu i-albinos abakwazi ukuhlala kahle babanexhala bazothatha kwenziwa ngaba amayeza. Ndidlule nje kancinci ke sihlalo ndithi izikolo are closing, the schools are closing. The challenge is We have been talking about parenting, talking about absent fathers, but now it's absent parents. Because we are told that those children will be taken to a particular boarding school. At the age, grade 1, who is going to take care of them? As grade 1, because of yes, we won't have enough numbers for children, school children, because of unemployment. Onyana bethu, they're staying at home. Abana bafazi, abazeki abana bafazi, because they are not working. Bazobodla ngantoni abafazi babo. Now there are no akho bantwana. Ngoku if athatha abafazi bababeka bengaphangeli, what is going to happen? Bazawuchitha ixesha, bachitha isikhathi bonwabe, babezonwabisa kaloku abaphangeli, producing more children. So, as Hlalo, I think I've talked a lot, but Chair, Tina as Abo Mama, si joqwalasele into ye forced marriages. Abona ukuthatha kwabantwana kusebenziwa abafazi. Hayi, sibubukhosi. We are against that. Now, they are supporting us. They are against that. Imitshato yabantwana, ukuthatha abantwana ukuthi bathatha ngamakhehla amadala akhathele ehleli ngapha evela ngapha eGoli, abuya athatha abantwana bakhiphe esikolweni, athi awubenza abafazi. Yintoni umfazi? Umntwana ona 10 years ona 12 ngakwangumfazi. Kohlukile ke abanye kukhona into zokuhlukana kwemitshato, kodwa ke Sihlalo siyacinga into ethi ke as the president is always raising these issues, ukuthi thina we address them and then get ways to deal with those issues. Xa sisuka apha Mongameli, asisuke sifike sihlale, we go back to our provinces and we check ukuthi what can we do. Now we are busy with other programs down the path. We may not be able to talk about them apha ngoku. Kodwa our minister besiya bazosibona programs esidilishana nazo. Apha ke ngoku ke kukho issue yabantu ababantu besebexeliwe bafika yapha. Hayi mina ndifuna kamnandi no chairperson we-NCOP. Naye sebehambile waya ngapha ngaphesheya. Nisixelele ukuthi ngobe nanihambile siyazi ba and siya appreciate nansi nomnye utata ohambile oswelekileyo bengutata obehamba osinela naye ngapha ya. Nina nani ke nafika pha nambe ningena emizini yabantu nakanjani na? Nisixelele babe nifike nenzalo singaxoxi. Nithi hayi thulani nathi besenza lonto. Benivele nifike ningene nje emizini yabantu. Nenze nantoni na? Ujonge i-food prices as affect abafazi. Kunyuswa nje i-food prices ezinye izinto and SABS it means akasebenzi kubo. Mawubheka izinto zabo abasithengisela zona, it means SABS is just looking at South Africans, doesn't look at bona, because into abazithengisa phaya uthenga i-toilet roll iphelele esandleni, but the same price. So, siyafuna ukuba nisincede, but sikhona nathi, sikhona. Amakhosi akhona kweza ndawo around i-borders, esinkosi uDube besitsho. We need to, masiqiniseni indawo zethu. Makubekho inventory kucheckishe umuntu olapha uba uze njani, uze kakuhle. Because sibone nase-TV abantu who have committed crime, andadoyika, makuzovela ukuthathwe kungene justice enkulu office uqhekezwe kubeke lapha kulandlwana yami ndikuyo. Yani makulula nje ukuvela kungene kwayona office enkulu yelizwe kungenwe nje kubeke laphi kuthi. Sekuphelele mina ndiyevela phela lethemba engqusho ephedi apho kungene kwathathwa izibhamu zonke epolice station. Ndathi sendiphike ngoku mina ke ngoku ndizakhuselwa ngibani xa zithathwe epolice station izibhamu. Uzokhuseleka. So ke siyacela into yokubana makhe siqinile napha kuBorders. Sikhangela sebengaphakathi ukuthi asinakuqinwa abantu. No. but sifuna siphinde sihlangane nani sixelele uba nanifike nenza le nto panina okanye singathethi sithule uba nani senza yona kodwa nani ngenzi yona nani yosebenza nabo mabasebenza bazosebenza and upublic works must check ezazindlu zakhe ezihleli ezidolophini zingasetyenziswayo kuhlala wonke umuntu owenza ukuthanda kwakhe apha enkosi sihlala.
Enkosi kakhulu siyabulela mama. Malibongwe. You have your support, our support. Etshwareng ka fa bogaleng fela jalo. We now move to the next topic is rural development and land reform, which will be introduced by Kosi Dikale, who's also the chairperson of the Limpopo House of Traditional Leaders. Mokone.
Gabo, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Ke a dumedisha modulasetulo, ke a dumedisha President Ngamara, ke a dumedisha President wa rena wa Contralesa, Ngwatu wa Bauba, Deputy Chairperson of the House of Traditional Leaders nationally, Kgoshi Mahlangu, baemedi ba dikgoshikgolo ba beng gona ke bone baemedi ba hlabirwa ba uba Sekhukhune KK, ministers who are with us today and deputy ministers, members of parliament who are with us, with the chairperson of the NCOP, Metan Dimudise, members of the National House of Traditional Leaders, members of the Chapter 9 institutions who are with us today, Maoshiga Muka, Babana Lerena, Mamotla, Bainga Muka Barena, Barbara Tanguru, especially from the Koi and the San, who are always with us, supporting this institution. I've been given the topic on rural development and land reform. And I must confirm that as it has already been touched by Kgoshi Tobijane, President da Contralesa, that land is central to the development of the society. And it's a thorny issue, and there's no way in which we cannot talk about it. You can think about the wars in other countries, conflicts in other countries. You can think about Israel and Palestine. You can think about Cancer Ruiwa in Nigeria. All those have been caused by land. And I'm not saying we are going to have confusion in our country. There's no way in which we can have confusion. And we may not be right to say, since 1994, this government did nothing. It won't be true. Changes have been made, but we are saying to the president, don't remove the foot from the pedal. Keep on accelerating, because we want to see more changes. The land question is central in realizing the national democratic society and true reconciliation and empowerment of our people. I'm saying our people. Sometimes when we say our people and batubare Khoshiarena, people centralization, people think about Ubuntu. Khere Khoshiaka, Keraure Khoshi wa community arena. But sometimes people do say Khoshiaka. But when they get into the boardrooms and chambers, they do something different, act differently, and no longer talk about Khoshiaka as Khoshiarena. And when we say our people, we don't talk about our people possessively, but we talk communally. Or together we can do things. And together we can move the society forward. It is also central to the leadership of the traditional leadership, and land remains a sore point within the institution of traditional leadership. All the land that is within the areas of traditional leadership must be handed over to the institution. We are not saying it should be handed over to the traditional leader. It should be handed over to the institution of traditional leadership, to the society, not to the community and the traditional leader, but the traditional leader and the community, which is a different matter. The policy of willing buyer and willing seller has failed dismally, that we all accept, and it's not an ideal way to go. How can we buy our own land? I don't think that will be possible. To show that the institution of traditional leaders is an important institution to the black community, and that is why batho ba tla re mabu a utswitswe ge go šia tlhokofetše, that we all know. Some will prefer to say langa le šonile in Swati ge go šia tlhokofetše, go ra re kgoši o swantšha le letšatši ka gore ke yena a dišang bophelo in the society. We view the land issue as being fundamental in the liberation struggle. Hence, the radical socio-economic transformation cannot be completed without vigorously addressing the land question. Yes, an audit of pre-colonial land ownership, use and occupation patterns must be done. After the audit, a single law should be developed to address the issue of land restitution without compensation. That law must be treated differently in terms of the duration to be passed into an act so that it does not take longer to address the matter. We want the main successes of this administration to be attributed to the land question. The pre-colonial land audit will depict the exact occupational patterns of our land. The return of land, as per the said audit, is critical in ensuring that land is brought back to the actual owners of the very land. The institution supports the constitutional amendment for the return of land without compensation. Constitutional amendment, Kgosi Suping, moetapele wa ntlo ya magosi, pele-peleng e sa thoma. Expropriation without compensation is the only way to go. But we don't take this point as the other people are taking it and expressing it differently to cause confusion in our country. We don't go that way. The ruling party and other political parties who understand the plight of the black people must support the constitutional amendment and the legislative amendment to take land without compensation. We are talking about constitutional amendment before we can say this is our land. Even in the rural areas, the 13% that we share, we don't encourage people to come and say, everyone agano tari, nage just tanesagagia itulela. We need to have policy, and we need to follow that policy. That is why we say people shall share. That comes from us. Everyone must get a piece, and no one should get a piece bigger than the other one. Because in our communities, we don't have people who are saying, this is richer than the other one. The necessary constitutional amendment must take place to address these challenges. The amendment may include the establishment of the Land Claims Commission as a Chapter 9 institution, as we have Chapter 9 institutions in this house today. in order to give a constitutional powers. Government does not support, and we also don't support, and encourage land grabs. We don't want to see that. Mo batho ba no tšea megoma, ba tšea lepe, ba thoma go rema dinaga ba re, re a dula nako e re rata. We don't encourage that. In fact, we must say we abhor that one of land grabs. Anybody who promotes land grabs will face the might of the law. When land is returned, the communities must utilize it to produce food and develop their local economies. Everyone would produce his own food. A produce dijo tša gage, a ba produce dijo tša go fa ba bangwe ba ka next door. When all the migrants come in the country, they would definitely get food from us. And there's no one wa ka bolawang ke tlala. Bjale ka ge rena re re, dijo di produce ke rena. Tša mehuta ka moka ga yona, tše di fepa mmele ntle go swana le tše di bang gona gano bjale. This topic, Chairperson, I think will be taken forward by the other colleagues who are in this house. Thank you very much.
Thobela Mkoni, re lo kwele, re lo nesetša pula. Let me deviate a bit from the order paper and invite Inkosi Buthelezi Umntwana kaPhindangena in his capacity as Inkosi yakwa Buthelezi to say a few words before he departs, because he's been pressed with time. Over to you, Sheikh.
Our Honorable Chairperson, Osmo Ubwane, and the Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Your Excellency, our President, Mamalal, the Minister of Kokta present, our Speaker of the National Council for Provinces, our chairpersons of all provincial houses and other traditional leaders, and the chairperson of IEC and other 9 chapter representatives, institutions representatives. I would like to first of all to apologize to my president for the fact that I foolishly committed myself to do 2 engagements in Durban this afternoon. And at the same time, I wish to thank you, sir, our chairperson, for allowing me to say a few words in response to our president's speech. I would like to say, sir, that the president's address to the 6th session of the National House of Traditional Leaders coincided with the launch of the 20th anniversary of the Constitution of South Africa. And as one of the protagonists in the drafting of the Constitution, I was asked by the Speaker to speak at the launch in the National Assembly. Unfortunately, that meant that I could not be present when His Excellency, our President, addressed our House. I'm a champion of our democratic constitution, for I believe it is a foundational contract between our nation's citizens and their government. Our constitution was written with a constant eye on the goal of creating and protecting social justice. Thus, the constitution guides us as we seek to fulfill the needs and aspirations of our people. I'm therefore deeply concerned by our President's announcement to our House, because I read the speech a couple of times when he says that the Constitution will be amended to allow land restitution with appropriation without compensation. Undoubtedly, we are all in agreement that the issue of land must be sorted out with urgency. We also accept, Your Excellency, that the formula of willing seller, willing buyer has not been a success. But I fear that if we deviate from the Constitution, we'll risk peace, reconciliation, and even investment in South Africa. So in the assembly, when the EFF party raised the matter, I voted with the ruling party, the ANC, because the ANC representative in the assembly said that there is the policy of the ANC to take land, appropriate land with compensation. Because the warning signs are there, Honorable Chairperson, we have seen what happened in our neighboring country, Zimbabwe, when government allowed land appropriation without compensation. I don't think that we want to be a basket case like Zimbabwe. Land grabs followed, with consequent violence, division, and deep social injustice. What would be different, Honorable Chair, in South Africa if we take this course of action and abandon the fundamentals in our Constitution that dictate appropriation with compensation? What measures has government put in place to ensure that this process would be free of corruption, maladministration, and opportunism? I worry, Your Excellency, about the future of my country, because my people are hungry and land is a burning issue. But I've learned over 60 years in leadership that complex issues cannot be simplified by throwing caution to the winds. We have been careful up to now not to light the spark that will see South Africa going up in flames. The tinder is still there, the matches are still ready, and we, the representative of our nation's people, still bear the responsibility, I believe, sir, to foster peace, reconciliation, nation building, as we, at the same time, pursue social justice. Your Excellency, our President, there have been times in the past when constitutional amendments were needed, but were not made. Indeed, chapters 7 and 12 of our Constitution have never been amended to protect the role, powers, and functions of us as traditional leaders, despite the agreement that you reached with the coalition of traditional leaders on the 30th of November 2000. My own proposed amendment to provide South Africa with a head of state and a head of government that is above reproach was never accepted, because I was worried and I'm distressed by the way that you as the head of state are treated in Parliament. I cannot agree that this is the time to deviate then from the Constitution. There is too much at stake. We must find one another and find a way to resolve the issue of land, yes, urgently, efficiently, and with absolute regard for justice. To my mind, Honorable Chairperson Khosi Mobane, government could have moved faster and more efficiently in the past 23 years if those ever-present evils of corruption, mismanagement, maladministration, and incompetence were removed from the process. If this evil remained unaddressed, while the foundational contract between government and the people is changed, we are destined to a disaster. I would like, lastly, sir, that our president has said that there are too many laws dealing with land reform, which causes confusion and delays, and that what is needed is a single law. The same is true of the institution of traditional leadership. There is still no single law that defines the role, powers, and functions of traditional leaders. Instead, piecemeal legislation has systematically diminished the part we are allowed to play in the governance of our people. This too would eventually lead to a crisis. It is better that we find the political will to deal with it now. I feel I must highlight the anxieties also, sir, in ending my remarks around the traditional courts bill, because the anxieties that are expressed are misplaced. Because that bill is not bringing anything new to traditional courts. These traditional courts have been providing justice in our communities for decades without any oppression of women. And in the Kingdom of KwaZulu, long before democracy, as soon as we received limited legislative powers, we changed the Code of Zulu law so that women were no longer minors, had local standing in judicial, and could own and inherit property. We made it possible for women to become amakosi and to preside over traditional courts. Who was more articulated in Nkosi Dube, one of amakosi from the kingdom? It pains me to hear our indigenous and customary laws being always dubbed as undemocratic. Finally, Your Excellency, and our national chairman of our national house, I appreciate your instruction to this house to develop heritage sites in order to contribute to local economies through the promotion of cultural tourism. I thank you, sir, for committing the Department of Arts and Culture, as well as small business development, to playing a critical role in such development. I hope this means that the Amakosini project in KwaZulu will be resuscitated. The birthplace of the Zulu nation, which is capable of attracting World Heritage Site status, is being destroyed because vast sections of the fence have been stolen, poaching is rife, and illegal buildings are being erected. It will be painful to see this government complicit in the destruction of Amakosini. We ask for immediate intervention. And I would like, with all humility, to thank our house, our chairperson of the National House, Nkosi Mawubane, for allowing me to say these few remarks before I run to catch a flight to Durban. Thank you, sir.
Sibonga kakhulu Shenge for the wise words. We know that you are the fountain of wisdom, and we appreciate a lot. We haven't learned enough from you. Nkosi Busise, siyabonga ndlela ntle. Let's move with the other paper of today and invite Osi Nzanwisi to follow up with the topic on rural development and land reform. Osiami.
Enkomu mthamu wa xitulu nkarhi lowu nyika kuwo ku va ni rito ka ntirho wa namuntlha eka holobyenkulu Mchaviseki. My colleagues have dispensed with all the greetings and praise singing. In these times that we are in, one is reminded of the novel A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, where he wrote, I quote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We're all going direct to heaven. We're all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period, that some of the noisiest authorities insisted on it being received for the good or for the evil in the superlative degree of comparison only," close quote. The question we ask ourselves is, the land that has been taken from traditional leaders, to whom should it be returned? Currently, the government that we support gives land that was taken from traditional leaders to community property associations. Will the traditional leaders from whom the land was taken ever get their land back? The community property associations are in no way linked to the traditional councils. Giving such a structure land causes conflicts with the traditional councils, as it signifies giving them authority and and power seemingly over traditional leaders. The returned land given to CPAs does not benefit the whole community, but a selected few. These lands should be utilized to produce food and develop local communities and economies. We support the 1 hectare, 1 community, and the 1 household and 2 cows principle as the baseline. We welcome the commitment by government to support black small-scale farmers. The support goes hand in hand with the maximization of the agricultural market. While we note that South Africa is experiencing water challenges, we pledge as traditional leaders to urge communities to use water sparingly. We also request government to invest in various systems, e.g. dams, technology, and indigenous knowledge systems for the provision and conservation of water. In Limpopo, where I come from, there is a Sotho saying that says, "Buloko ayin shikamuka." Be that as it may, akombela holobye nkulu, mintirho ya mfumo eka ku tirhisana ni mifumo xivongo a yi vulavule. Tiko hi ku angarhela ri ta hluvuka na nkhensa.
Thank for Osiamena. To wrap up on the topic, we have Principal Nxamashe. Ciao.
Mhlali ngaphambili zikumkani zelizwe lakokwethu ingqangene ntsiba eyongamele ilizwe loMzantsi Afrika inqamalala abaphathiswa abagqume umhlana ugxa wabo osingathiswe imicimbi yobukhosi namasekela inhloko zezindlu zowisomthetho ezithande ukuxikwa sisiwo noxinzelelo oludalwa sisimilo esigutyungelwe yingqakaqha yamathumba. Ndinikile imbeko kusihlalo webhunga lamaphondo. Indlu ngokubanzi ndibhotisile sihlalo. Isicwili endabelwe ukutyhuthula sona kulomlu wolusuku kukucangcatha ndingqishe ndiqakadule kulomba udibene nomhlaba kwilizwe elimanyeneyo. Chairperson, building an inclusive national democratic society begins being realistic and pragmatic about national identity. We are first and foremost Africans before we become South Africans. The fact that Africa was balkanized with despicable cadastral boundaries as endorsed and adopted at the 1884-85 Berlin Conference must never confuse Africans into being doubtful that they are indigenous inhabitants of each and every square inch of the African soil. All of us with non-European and colonial pigmentation are indigenous to this land. That is why we are unapologetic in our assertion that land in Africa and land in South Africa is our God-bequeathed and bestowed asset in which we have an inalienable right. It is in this land where our forebears were mercilessly butchered by Dutch and British imperial fascist colonialists who not only subjected us to perpetual economic strife, but over and above that they rendered our forebears for generations, as Sol Plaatje so intimately laments it, pariah in our own land. Without land, there's no community. Without a community, there is no nation. And without a nation, there is no institution of royalty. Land, thus, is an ingredient without which the institution of traditional leadership is complete. That is why we support the call to accelerate access to land through a swift response to redistribution and restitution. Over and above that, we must accelerate, Mr. President, the security of tenure. That is very critical. It is regrettable that 23 years after our democratic dispensation, communities in communal areas remain insecure in terms of legal tenure system, save for a stopgap measure in the form of the Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act, which is annually renewable. This is an insult that our communities remain with downgraded tenure security in the form of PTOs, permission to occupy. What that means is that our people have occupational rights, not rights of ownership. It's an indictment, Mr. President. The land, as the previous speakers have said, must be transferred to our communities not later than December recess 2017. Failure to respond to this constitutional injunction, Mr. President, will risk both the executive and the legislature being found to have acted in breach of Section 237 of the Constitution, because land is a constitutional imperative which Parliament and the executive must execute with diligence. Similarly, the amendment to the Land Restitution Act must be equally accelerated. It is very much displeasing that the Amendment Act for Land Restitution had to be invalidated by the Constitutional Court. We ask ourselves, Mr. President, for how long shall we remain objects of judicial mockery by having legislations declared invalid by the Constitutional Court when we have state and parliamentary legal advisors? Bafunde phi bona? Lento kufuneka into yokokubana imithetho abacebisa amalungu eParlamente iyochithwa zinkundla yonke le mihla bafunde phi. Lento inento yokwenza nokokuba isakhono sabo singakanani. And we are saying that with no apology. Uba ngabana iGauteng sinkwapha mabaye esikolweni bayozilola khona. Sawubona ngeziphumo zemithetho engajikwayo zinkundla zomgaqo siseko okokuba eneneni banaso esi sakhono sokucebisa iParlamente noRhulumente. Simple example, Mr. President. You take communal land tenure. Why was it not clear to them to tag Clara as a Section 76 bill? Why did they have to be told by the Constitutional Court that you cannot just use your pith and measure test without balancing it with the test of measurability? Why? It's an indictment. Let me now address the question of expropriation of land and property. Chairperson, expropriation of land is in pursuit of public interest. On expropriation must be prioritized. If there is doubt, we appeal, Mr. President, that you call a national referendum so as to test the public opinion on expropriation without compensation, where evidence of historical injustice is established. The Constitution empowers our president to do that in terms of Section 84. The notion of expropriation without compensation, Mr. President, follows the logic of dispossession without reparation. It is a fact that, Mr. President, the indigenous people were brutally dispossessed of their land by Dutch and British imperialists without reparation. That is why we support your call for the pre-colonial audit and also propose a land audit commission that will focus on two things and two things only: historical acquisition and state investment to all property owners in South Africa. We can only make a determination on a just and equitable compensation after investigation and verification of historical acquisition and state investment in the property. To address the historical legacies of injustice and racial discrimination, there is no way that we can fairly arrive at a just and equitable compensation. All those who acquired land through inappropriate means must voluntarily hand over our land to the state for its equitable redistribution. Sisathetha kakuhle ngokumongameli. Uyazazi wena onalo mhlaba. Awuzange uze uthwele mhlaba. Awuzange uthenge mhlaba. Ufumene ngokuphalaza igazi elingenatyala. Ubuyise umhlaba wethu. Libuyise ilifa lethu. Zingekaxhaphi izinja apho wawuphalaze khona igazi lokhokho bethu. Ubulelena wathabathana. Noba iBhayibhile awukholelwa kuyo, uzukuyofunda incwadi yokumkani bokuqala. Isahluko ngama-21 ivesi ye-19. 1 Kings chapter 29 verse 19. Asiphazami mongameli. Asiphazami bantwana begazi. Umhlaba lo mawubuyiselwe kubaniniwe. Ukuba ngaba sifuna uqinisekisa okokuba kukho uzinzo nocwangco kweli lizwe. Ndidlule. Support to traditional leadership institutions is a legislative injunction, Chairperson. We have a legislation, Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act. Section 6 of this act makes it glaringly clear that support must be given to the institution of traditional leadership. Kutheni lendo kude kube leli xesha kungekho msindleko othi amabhunga abantwana begazi nezizwe zabo nazi izixhobo zokusebenza ibekho londo kumqulu ekuvunyelwene ngawo. Lo mthetho wapasa ngo-2003. Ngoku siku-2017 akukho nto ethi lamabhunga nansi ibudget elungiselelwe okokuba asebenze. These are organs of people's power. Uba mhlawumbe lento iyathandabuzeka. Ngamabhunga abantu la. Kufuneka axhotyiswe ngezixhobo. Similarly, Chairperson, the same legislation in terms of section 20 makes provision for a number of functions to be assigned to the institution of traditional leadership by different state organs and government departments. Until now, we ask ourselves, why has this not happened? Kufuneka kuthini? Ngoba ayikho sendalweni yobukhosi ukukhalazela urhulumende onyulwe ngabantu bazo. Kufuneka kuthini ukuze urhulumende abone kufanelekile okokuba usection 20 lo enziwe abe nentsingiselo. Okanye into yokokuba mhlawumbi wayebhalwa kuba kufuneka kubhalwe amagama amnyama kwiphepha elimhlophe. Siyacela ke Mongameli okokuba ezi functions zilapho uyazibona zidwelisiwe: arts and culture, land administration, agriculture, health, welfare, administration of justice, ude uyogqibela ngo-education. Namhlanje izikolo ziziziqhubu zemigegemba. Abantwana bagutyungelwe ziziyobisi. Abantwana begazi abakwazi kungenelela ngoba ilizwe elilawulwa ngolungelo nonomalungelo babuza umbuzo othi iphi into ethi abantwana begazi banentatho nxaxheba kulawulo lwesikolo. Yinto ke le esicinga fana okokuba ifuna ukuxheshwa mhlali ngaphambili. Umongameli abhexeshe umhlambi wakhe ukuze ilizwe likwazi ukulawuleka. Ukanti ukuba ngabana uya kumgaqo siseko welizwe, section 143 makes provision for the recognition of traditional monarchs by way of an enactment of provincial constitutions. Ndiyayazi ke okokuba le into ndithetha yona ngoku iya kanye enhliziyweni yokokuba eyona ndawo esijonge ukuphelela kuyo yeyiphi. Ingaba sijonge kwi-federal system okanye sijonge kwi-unitary system? Ndike ndive mhlali ngaphambili xa kuthethwa very loosely kuthiwe iSouth Africa is a unitary state. Not at all. It can be a unitary state when we have provinces with concurrent functions. Those are federal features. Ngoba sikhangela nje, for as long as the provinces zisekhona, kukho iikumkani ezikhoyo kulamaphondo. Provincial legislatures, siyacela Mongameli, must be directed to enact provincial constitutions so as to create traditional monarchs in all provinces where there are kings who are recognized as kingships. Eyokugqibela apha kwi-constitution sithethile nge-traditional courts. Ingxoxo yethu Mongameli ithi akuqalwa nto intsha ngezinkundla. For that matter, these are courts of law in terms of section 166E of the Constitution. Any doubt to that fact, umntu makaye phaa kwi-certification judgment of the final constitution. Iza kukuxelela into yokokuba i-traditional courts are courts as recognized in terms of period, nothing else. So siyayinqwenela ke le nto mongameli. Sisitsho into yokokuba neparlamente xa kufikwa apha kuyo njengoba ngoku le bill seyiphumile kwi-executive iseparlamente, parliamentary law advisors zeke zibe ngathi ziqinisa iziquluba kwesi sihlandlo, ngoba asizukuvuma ukwenziwa izigculelo zokuxhentsiswa ngabo ngonobenani. These are courts of law, period. Uba ngabana loo nto niyayithandabuza, masiyeni kwinkundla yomgaqo siseko iyokusintolikela okokuba kulaa mqolo ka-199 ithetha ukuthini ngela xesha itywina umgaqo siseko. Ngaphezulu, customary law is recognized in the same and equal footing as English common law and Dutch Roman law. If you have any doubt about that, uzujonge phaya section 39, subsection 3 of the Constitution. Interpretation of Bill of Rights does not deny their existence. In fact, it supports the promotion of the customary law okokuba ibe kwizinga elinye nezinye inkqubo zomthetho. Isisithuko mongameli into yokokuba ngexesha lokuphatha kwethu ilizwe kodwa sihlale sigunkcuza empilinini wempembelelo zoqhina kaqhonono. Mandihlale phansi ngelithi mhlale ngaphambili. Ilizwe loMzantsi Afrika linemingeni elijongene nalo. Ukuze sikwazi ukulihlambulula kwisimo senkcithakalo yempembelelo zofunzeweni, kuza kufuneka sayamane ngemihlana. Abantwana begazi nabantu bakokwethu abakumlibo nomnombo wokulwela inkululeko. Sixakwe namhlanje ngamakroti enkxolazwe. Ngexesha ekwakufuneka kulwelwe ukukhusela inkululeko, akukho mbali namqela okrolekileyo owalathayo okokuba kukho nephundu lento abakhe bayenza. Namhlanje ngamakroti afuna ukusixelela indlela inkululeko emayilawulwe ngayo. Simeleke okokuba ngeli xesha thina bantwana begazi sikunye nabo bonke abakumlibo wokukhusela inkululeko, sayamane ngemihlana sikhusele le nkululeko, ngoba kuyabonakala okokuba uba sinakwenza ngolo hlobo eli lizwe liza kungenelwa. Siza kuthi sisothuka, siza kuthi sivula amehlo, siyakuthi siqabuke ilizwe limkile. Zemka inkomo magwalandini. Watsho umfo kaRhobusana. Zemka inkomo magwalandini. Vukani lingekatshoni ilanga.
Siyabulela chawe ka enkosi. Ndithe nqa ngale limi lakho. But I'll learn more. Let us now shift to Koi and Son matters that will be led by Dr. Cecil Lefrere of the National Khoisan Council. Khoisan.
Honorable President Zuma, Honorable Chairperson of the National House, Kosi Mubani, the Deputy Chair of the House, Minister Des van Rooyen, Chairperson of the NCOP, Deputy Minister Bapela and Nell, members of Parliament present here, MECs, provincial chairpersons of the House and their deputies, and members of the Chapter 9 institutions, and also all our Khoi and San leaders and members of the communities that they represent, and all protocol observed. The National Khoi and San Council was formed during 1999 by our former President Nelson Mandela and his administration to address the concerns of the African Khoi and San historical communities. He appointed independent researchers to verify these leaderships and community claims at that time. These researchers made recommendations, and on that basis, membership of the National Khoi and San Council was established during 1999. Those findings and basis confirm that the Khoi and San is comprised historically only of 5 main groupings, namely the San, the Griqua, the Kurana, the Cape Khoi, and the Nama. This confirmed that historically, for many, many generations, these communities roamed the valleys, the mountains, and the plains of this beautiful country. These 5 main groupings comprised of many communities historically. This has been clarified and classified in what is called official government reports and further called the status quo reports. These historical communities were in process since 1999 to ensure they are included and meaningfully get recognition of their customary communities and their leadership structures. It is within this framework, Mr. President, that we would like to present our input to your speech today. We, the leaders of the NKC, see ourselves as fellow Africans, together with the communities that we represent. We believe we are all Africans. We support your view of the importance of unity in our country and among us as fellow Africans across the region. We also use this opportunity to let you know that we support the policy approach of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights as the human rights body of the African Union on indigenous peoples. It emphasizes the importance of African governments to address the collective rights and the concerns of African indigenous communities who are not accessing their rights-based recognition in terms of land and customary institutions on par with their fellow Africans. The African Commission approach on indigenous communities speaks to the ongoing concerns of the Khoisan communities, whose collective rights, such as indigenous languages, indigenous institutions, and ancestral land, are not fully addressed, as already recognized by you, Honorable President Zuma. We believe South Africa will see real unity when the Khoi and San communities can also access their collective rights on par with the other already recognized African communities. We are in agreement with many of the key issues you raised, Honorable President. We expressed our appreciation for your intense concern about the unacceptable high levels of crime in our country. As Khoisan leaders, we share this concern because our value systems had been heavily eroded since colonial times and is being replaced by a violent subculture. As you know, most of our people live in gangster-ridden areas on the Cape Flats and elsewhere in our country. Mr. President, we have essentially two main points to make here today. Firstly, just a moment, sorry. Firstly, we are encouraged by the traditional and the Khoisan leadership bill that could have been introduced to Parliament and be brought to the legislative stage. It is currently at as we speak. We see this as a crucial step towards the recognition of the customary institutions and communities of the Khoi and San. As you know, Honorable President, it is a very long-awaited process. We ask that the status quo report of 2000, as initiated by COPTA, be the policy framework informing the Khoi and San community's concerns as it articulates the many historical Khoi and San communities that exist historically. We also note with alarm the human rights concerns surrounding the issues affecting the broader traditional leadership institutions in South Africa, as have been raised by sectors of civil society. We ask for COPTA Parliamentary Committee to fundamentally ensure the current draft is in line with our hard-fought constitutionally entrenched constitution. Failure to address these concerns raised around traditional leadership holds the potential to rob the Khoi and San communities of this long-awaited opportunity. They have not historically formed part of the South African traditional leadership framework. As the result, they could face the risk of losing yet another opportunity for the historical redress. It is at this point that I also want to convey our sincerest gratitude to the President of Controlesa for the emotional support that you gave the Khoi and San communities today. By doing so, you did ensure us that we are not alone anymore in this battle for recognition. Mr. President, we have listened with interest to your forthcoming land reform initiatives to resolve a very complex issue of land dispossession. However, we will have to engage much more with our Khoi San leadership and communities to arrive at a formal and a collective opinion in this regard. Also, we extend our heartfelt thanks to Honorable Minister Nkwinti in terms of his department's implementation of their program of exceptions pertaining to the land claims of the Khoi and San. We are also mindful of the pre-colonial land audit that you have alluded to in your 3rd of March address. We remind you, Honorable President, of the recommendation of the former United Nations Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples who visited South Africa in 2005 and who stated in his report to the South African government that an audit be done to determine also the land needs of the Khoi and the San people. We respectfully request you, Mr. President, that the Khoi and San get a specific focus when you look at your proposed land audit. We would like to be fully part of the processes that will drive this important initiative. Mr. President, we thank you. Mr. Chairperson, we thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Gangang. Thank you very much, Chairperson Frere. To reflect deepest concern of the Khoi and San, we moved forward together. Now, I'm going to give our elders to cement the debate and thereafter call the president to respond. Before then, okay, I'll start with one of our elders who was supposed to speak on policy and legislation. But he will be representing also the elders, Professor Nkosi Zibi, Radebe, Hlubi.
Ngiyabulela umhlali ngaphambili Nkosi Mawubane Mongameli obekekileyo ubawo uJacob Gezeyihlekisa Zuma abaphathiswa bonke abalapha qala ngobawo uVan Rooyen dize ngabanye abalandelayo abazizandla zabaphathiswa umama uDoko Xhasa uba ubopela nomama wethu umama uThandi Mudise usomlomo mhlambi kunokwenzeka uba ndenze impazamo kube khona indibashiyayo ndawusebenzisa amazwi endiqhela uweva ethethwa all protocol observed. I've looked at two pieces of legislation in the task that I was given, namely the Traditional Courts Bill and the Traditional Leadership. And the Leadership Khoi-San Bill. When we start with the Traditional Courts Bill, in the preamble, it's written, and further recognizing that customary law is premised on the principle and spirit of voluntary affiliation, and that its application is accessible to those who choose to live in accordance with the values of evolving customary law and abide by the practices and customs thereof. The worrying term is the spirit of voluntary association, which means then that if a subject in your village or in your community is trying to duck the law, they can use this as a scapegoat, that I do not subscribe to your customary law. And if you look at countries that, for instance, are independent, if you break the law, they don't use any other law, they use their local laws. So with traditional leadership, I think this matter needs to be relooked by those who are looking at this legislation of traditional courts. those that face the law will use this as a means to escape, because they shall say they do not subscribe to customary law as long as they don't subscribe to customary law. As long as someone is affiliated in a particular clan or tribe, they are subject to the laws and rules of that community. And we shall be seen to be playing games if we allow this to happen. I'm aware that the issue of traditional and Khoisan leadership bill is a very sensitive piece of information, of legislation. And it needs to be fast-tracked so that eventually the Khoisan people also can enjoy their rights in their motherland. The Portfolio Committee on Finance in the Northwest Province has made a call that all provinces should come together so that a real look is made, on these two pieces of legislation so that they can be brought to finality. Examples are, for instance, with the Traditional Courts Bill, there's a call that voluntary association should be defined, and that any person who has been summoned and they dug to appear in court, that should be regarded as contempt of the court. There should be enforcement of orders in customary law as well, and a number of other matters. So that is the submission we are making, particularly the issue of finalizing legislation, namely that the provinces should meet to discuss these pieces of legislation. I thank you.
Thank you, Truby. That you will be followed by Khosi Shupi, the founding chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders. Mufurut.
Mr. Chair, the Honorable Chair of the House and his Deputy, our President and Ministers and Deputy Ministers present here, members of the National House, and honorable members of the provincial houses, I think so much has been said. Too much ground has been covered. The day we started preparing for this debate on the speech of the President, I said to members that there was nothing new. This dates back to 1997 when we started this house. The lucky part of it, apparently, is that I'm the one and only surviving former chair. Maybe next time it will be me who's gone. Be that as it may, I want to thank all members having been able and having successfully delivered all that we prepared over the past 2 days. And as such, I happen to be a monitor and not a debater.
What I'm doing is just to check on whether the youngsters are doing what I'm telling them to do. So the final note which was brought to our attention was this issue of the traditional leadership. In fact, yeah, the traditional cause bill. We are worried, Mr. President, by this voluntary affiliation. We learned that the cabinet has passed this, but I want to plead, I want to make a plea to the powers that be that before this could go to Parliament, it should be re-looked into. We honestly are worried. Otherwise, it would mean the drug abuses, the crimes that are prevailing in our areas, the suffering of our people, having to have their cases postponed on. The thing is, this is too close, man. We are having our people are having it difficult to have their cases concluded at the magistrates' courts. Even some that are very minor. Over and above that, some even die having not had their cases heard. So we need a speedy passage of this law in Parliament so that people could have access to justice. I want to highlight one or two issues that may not have been brought to the attention of the powers that be. The concern that I have, Mr. President, is this Freedom Charter statement that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. One old man asked me a question, does this also include all these people that are from outside? Because in the end, they may end up saying to us, after accommodating them in our houses, to say to us, the house will belong or belongs to all who sleep in it. If South Africa can belong to all those who live in it, after accommodating someone into your house, he'll tell you, the house that we sleep in fact, the house belongs to us who sleep in it. And what are we going to say to them? So on this hearty note, I want to thank all the members who spoke before me and say, Mr. President, I think this is enough for you to listen further.
Sorry, Chairperson, may I address you, please? Yeah, Chairperson.
That's
Sorry.
out of order.
I know, Chairperson, but I need to
only when you
address
are
you, please.
spoken to.
May I address you, Chairperson?
May you please refrain? We are following
Please,
on order
Chairperson.
paper.
Because our leaders also need to speak and time is moving. Can you please let our leaders speak? We have many issues. Please, I beg you. I've
May
been
you
asking to
sit
address
down,
you,
please?
Chairperson. I cannot sit here and our leaders didn't speak. We need our leaders to speak, Chairperson. If I'm out of order, then I'm out of order.
Sergeant at Arms, can you assist us? Our last elder to speak is Inkosi Ngagomhlaba Matanzima, Tata Madiba.
Diyabulela kakhulu kuhlala ngaphambili. Umongameli obekekileyo amalungu endlu yenkosi nawamaphondo umphathiswa obekekileyo namasekela kuhlala ngaphambili we-NCOP indwendwe ezibekekileyo. Masilibulele mhlali ngaphambili elithuba elingafanele libekho. Masilibulele kakhulu. Nesi siphakamiso sikamongameli sisibulele sokuba bingaske xa kuxoxwa intetho yakhe abantu abake bathethe eve inkosi zithetha zingafundi maphepha. Ndicinga uba ingcamango le ebalulekileyo kakhulu kwizidalwa zikasomandla. Uba umuntu akathethe eviwe uba uthini ngezi meko ziphambi kwethu. Izithethi ke ezithethileyo apha zithethe kakuhle mhlali ngaphambili kakhulu. Ndifuna ukwenze nje kukho lo mcimbi wemfundo eSouth Africa namhlanje. Thina abantu abahlala phaya ezilalini apho kuhlala khona abantu abahamba nzima sibona usizi elikhuthazwa ngurhulumente. Phaya kuvalwa izikolo ezazakhiwe ngabantu bezakhela abantwana babo. Urhulumente ufika kwakhe usuka vala izikolo. Nasiphina isizwe esifuna ukuhlambuluka ebunzimeni sihlanjululwa imfundo. Mongameli ke xa kuthethwa lento abantu abayenzayo bayayicikozela. Bathetha izinto ezingenawuncedwa sithi. Bathi akho zititshala. Bathi abanawukhupha ititshala iyotitsha abantwana babantu abamnyama abalishumi esikolweni. Umbuzo esinawo ke ngoku ngoba abantwana xa belishumi okanye bebahlanu esikolweni abafanelanga ufundiswa bona. Kunosekuvalwa isikolo esisabo kuthiwe bazawuthathwa ngemoto basiwe kwesinye isikolo. Yabona ke xa kwenziwa lento mhlekazi kukho izinto ezibalulekileyo ebomini bethu ezonakalayo. Abantwana xa bethathwa ekuseni ngemoto neka bavuke bashiya amakhaya kwa sekuseni bayokhwela kwezi moto basiwe kuloo ndawo basiwa kuyo babuyele emakhaya ilanga litshonile kwakhona bezowulala. Amakhaya ngoku abo yindawo yoyawulala basukele ezimoto. Inkcubeko yekhaya iyonakala. Akho xesha labo aba bantwana bahlale nabazali babo bababone izimilo zabo ukonakala kwazo babalungise besebancinane. Akukho mzali uhamba nezi moto zilayisha aba bantwana abone uba kwezi moto kwenziwa ntoni ngaba bantwana. Thina ke sibona ukonakala kwesizwe sisoniwa ukuqala ezingcanjini ukuze kungaze kwelizwe loMzantsi Afrika kumile nto yeli lizwe. Ze kumile kuphela izinto ezizimfundiso zezinye izizwe. ngalendlela sibona ngayo, sibona ingathi elizwe lizawuphinda lithinjwe, kuba ingqeqesho ngenkcubeko yabantu imiliselwa besebancinane abantwana, bakhule beyazi into yakowabo. Kodwa aba bantwana xa bethathwa bebancinci kangaka bahanjiswe esithubeni besiya kufuna imfundo kwilizwe elikhululekileyo, imfundo engenawubakho kwiindawo abahlala kuzo. Le nto ayisiphathi kakuhle. Ezi zikolo njengoba senditshilo zakhiwa ngabantu ngemali zabo, bezakhela abantwana uqikelelo lwamanani lenziwe kakuhle ukuze kubekho isikolo sokuqala endaweni. Akusuke nje kuthiwe kuzawukwakhiwa isikolo, kuqala kuhlangana abantu bathi kule ndawo yethu sifuna isikolo, masibethe imali sakhe isikolo. Ivakala kakubi ke ngoku into yobana kufika urhulumente achithe isikolo kakhulu, noba izizathu zithini, kodwa ivakala kakubi loo nto. Nawe mhlali ngaphambili, akho zititshala. Sixakiwe ke thina uba uze zibekho ititshala kwenziwa ntoni. Ititshala zivela phi uze zibe khona elizweni? Izintloni le nto xa uyijongileyo usazi uba kwakukhona apha kwelizwe ii-training schools, ii-training colleges. Ngabuza namhlanje sayaphi? Ngoku zazivalwa kwakuthi iititshala zizawuvela phi? Khona ibingasithatha iminyaka emingaphi uvuselela ezi training colleges sizokwazi ubuyisela imfundo ibe kwezi ndawo abantu bahlala kuzo. Ngoku kuthiwa kwenye ingxaki yoba iititshala zifuna uhlala ezilalini. Uyayijonga naloo nto uba ivela phi loo nto. Ayinawubakho loo nto ngenxa yoba kaloku sivale ii-training colleges kwezi ndawo abantu bahlala kuzo, baze abantwana baloo ndawo bangakwazi ukufumana uqeqeshelwa imfundo, bahamba bemka babheka ezidolophini baqhele ukuhlala pha, abasafuni ukubuya. Ezinye iinkqubo xa zenziwayo ibalulekile mhlali ngaphambili into yoba kujongwe iimeko zabantu belizwe, kungajongwa ukuba amanye amazwe, andithi kungabi sajonga uba ebumelwaneni kwenziwa, kodwa kungase kubonakala uba iinkqubo zethu nemithetho yethu ifuna ukulungiselela abantu abangengabo abantu beli lizwe. Imbi le nto siyibona apha ezikolweni kubantwana abancinane, ukuchithwa kwamakhaya achithakale ngohlobo loba ze kumile imbewu kuloo makhaya engeyeyo yaloo makhaya. Ungayikhangela indlela ezi zinto zithethwayo ngamanye amalungu abekekileyo apha zezimo zabantwana abaneminyaka eli-10, izinto abazenzayo, ubuze uba bazifunda phi. Ezi moto kuthiwa zizawuthutha aba bantwana kwamanye amaxesha zingabikho, bahlale phaya abantwana balinde, bagodole phaya esitopini belinde imoto ezawulayisha ingafiki. Kufuneka mhlawumbi ke mongameli sizawuthetha kakubi sithetha kwintloko enye. Aba bantu Xebe, aba baphathiswa bengekho apha kwikhabhinethi, ndithatha ngolo hlobo, ichotshelwa ngumongameli. Unako ukucingwa into yoba into zinto ezithethwa ngumongameli ezi. Noba sesithi bendisendlwini yenkosi kuthethwa ngolu hlobo, athi umntu kube bengekho, athi siyamazi umongameli uhlele ethetha le nto nguye lutshoyo. Ibingelungi ngani into yobana aba baphathiswa bakarhulumente ke baze apha bathi iqwelele apha ke sihlala apha ke sibhekise kubo umongameli ehleli pha. Ibingonantoni loo nto? Ngoba siyazibonela nje sizijongele sibone uba lo mphathiswa uyatsala lo akenzi into. Singamxelela thina uba akenzanga nto yeyiphi le nto sithi akayenzanga. Mhlawumbi ngaphambili bendiphakamisa ngosami into yoba njengopresident uze apha namhlanje, wayeze apha ezofunda intetho yovula indlu, namhlanje uze apha ezomamela ingxoxo, uzaphinda umongameli ufuneka ayivale loo ngxoxo. Ezi ministers zona zitheni le nto zingenakwenza njengoba esenza umongameli? Zizopresenta apha ezi nto bezizipresenta phaa kwi-National Assembly. Ame phaa umphathiswa athethe uba le mali ayinikiweyo yalo nyaka mali uza kwenzani ngayo, ithini i-action plan yakhe. Sizibuzele kuye, siye kube sibuza kumongameli. Ingonantoni loo nto mhlawumbi ngaphambili kwilizwe elinenkululeko? Bendiphakamisa ngolo hlobo make silandeleni loo nkqubo ke beze apha bazoxelela thina elizwe kaloku sibaphathisa imicimbi yalo leli lethu. Sinelungelo ke ngoku lokuba sibabuze ezinye izinto esingaziqondiyo, basixelele nathi izinto abangaziqondiyo. Bendiphakamisa ngolo hlobo. Kule nto ibithethwa apha kuthethwa ngemithetho eyilwayo mhlawumbi ngaphambili. Ezinye izinto bezithethwe ngutshawe phaa ezantsi. Le nto yokukhetha uba lo mthetho ufanele uba ukoluphi uluhlu lwemithetho. Ebebize ke o-75 no-76. Aba bantu basepalamente bayayazi ke loo. Ukhona mongameli apha into ebonakalayo uba ikhona intlonti. Andifuni ukuthi benziwa kukuba mhlawumbi bafunde phini, kodwa kuyabonakala ikhona intlonti. Bawuthi lo mthetho kuba bewuqonda uba kufuneka kuyiwe eluntwini ngawo, kuyofunwa izimvo, bathatha indlela emfutshane apha kwi-classification, but hayi lo uwa kolu hlobo njema kuthiwa ngu-75 omnye ngu-76, right? Na olunye uluhlu luthi hayi kuya kuthathwa uluvo olunational, olunye uluhlu luthi makuyiwe ebantwini. Bakhethe ukuthi ngabom bawenze umthetho ofanele ubuzwe ebantwini ungayi ebantwini. Le nto ayenziwanga iparlamente, ayenziwanga ngumongameli, yenziwa ngaba baklasifaya imithetho le uba olu luhlu lomthetho liwa kweyiphi i-section kwezi sections zimbini. Siyayibona ke ngokuthini uba le nto ivimba abantu belizwe laseMzantsi Afrika ithuba loba bathethe ngoba beqonda indlela umthetho omi ngayo. Le nto mayilungiswe le. Iyafuna ulungiswa le nto mhlawumbi ngaphambili. Chairperson we-NCOP iyafuna ulungiswa, imoshakala phaa le nto. Le mithetho kuthiwa yaze yathi inkundla yomgaqo-siseko yagweba yathi ibisaziwa kwangokuya ibilungiselelwa uba izawuqhutywa kanje, ibisaziwa uba izawuba naloo mpoxo ekugqibeleni. Usenganabo abantu apho ucimba bafana uba bahamba nawe kanti abahambi nawe. Bazawumane bebeka oonoxhaka apha endleleni, ze xa kukhonjwa umonakalo ukhonjwe kumntu omnye. Kanti abantu abenza le nto ayinguloo mntu, akazi noba konakele phi into nayo wenziwa ixhoba ekugqibeleni awunayikholelwa into yobana sizawuthini mane epalamente enamalungu ayi-400 angaba kayiqondi onke loo malungu into yobana yintoni engalunganga kulo mthetho le nto uzayogwetywa enkundleni loo nto ikhona ingxaki ikhona ingxaki sicinga uba kuzofuneka ke nathi singake sicelwe xa kuza uba kukho imithetho eyilwayo siyijonge uba kuba ndake ndeva kuthiwa hayi eminye imithetho ayimele kuya endlwini yenkosi iyofuna uluvo lwazo umbuzo wam kuba yimithetho enjani le izawulawula phi noba ngoba umthetho mhlekazi ngowakwa-defense noba ngaba ngowaphi umthetho ozawulawula kweli lizwe ulawule abantu abahlala kweli lizwe andiqondi into yobana ungaske nje kuthathwe khaphu kuthiwe hayi abantu abanabananto ukuthetha apha kodwa ngumthetho uzawulawula bona ilizwe likhululekile kufuneka lenziwe ngohlobo loba abantu balo baliqonde balikhululekile bangamane besenzelwa imithetho engathethi into kubo ze kuthiwe mabayithobele loo mithetho kwenziwe icebo loba makuthiwe umongameli akawazanga umthetho uba awungqamani ne-constitution kanti biyenziwe ngabantu phaa ekusekweni kwezinto loo kukho enye imposiso eyenziwayo apha mongameli nuko siyayiqonda into yoba xa kwakho umthetho ozawuya epalamente kuyaqikelelwa nendleko yalo mthetho uba xa usebenza lo mthetho yimalini ezawufuneka uba mayibekho uze usebenze kodwa siyaqaphela apha kule mithetho ke andazi kweminye kodwa kule inento okwenza nobukhosi le nto yokhostwa komthetho ayikho ayenziwa ze kuthi ke ngoku ekugqibeleni xa kufuneka lo mthetho usebenze bathi bezawufumana uncedo okanye ii-benefits kuwo kuthiwe hayi awukho mali kuba zange kuqikelelwe umzekelo ngexesha umongameli ingumongameli umntlante i-commission leya ye-public officers remuneration yenza iziphakamiso zasayinwa ngumongameli uba zilungile ezazizii-benefits ezazawulungele inkosi inento yokwenza loo nto nee-pensions nezinye izinto nee-medical aids yasayinwa kodwa ilungile mabathi benefit kule arrangement yasepalamente because nabo bazi-public office bearers but ndiyakuxelela nqamalala mntana enkosi ayikho loo zange yenziwe uyabuza ke ngoku xa ungangamba kanti ukuthetha kukamongameli elizweni alongameleyo kuthetha ukuthi kuthi hayi uyasayinwa le nto kungekho mali ayikabikho nangoku kodwa umongameli ukubave amalungu epalamente indlela akhala ngayo xa kusithiwa ayizunyuka imali ebekhalile nangoku yabona ke mhlala ngaphambili injoli xa ithanda ukuthi njengoba kubekwe isitya senyama phambi kwayo isike itye kuyo qho aba balinde ukwabelwa yiyo bahambe badinwe baye bonke esityeni mayilungiswe le nto laa determination yayisemthethweni uba siyathanda siyahlonipha nje ngesithatha yona le ke sinive phaa enkundleni uba ninakona uphumelela I don't think ningaphumelela xa sinawuya phaa enkundleni yi-determination le zii-recommendations ezenziwe i-commission esekwe ngomthetho yayiba yi-determination eapprovwe yi-president of the country izisuke nje inga-honarishwa loo nto. Ndicinga uba fanuba umongameli wena unamavaneleyo wemeko zokuphatheka kakubi kwenkosi ngexesha labelungu. Imbi ngoku into yobana inkosi izawuphinda ziphatheke kakubi ngexesha lokuphatha kwabantu bakowazo. Yazi umntu xa ucinizela sasiyiqonda thina ucinizelwa ngabelungu basicinizela ngoba balazi ixabiso lethu. Kodwa ibuhlungu ngoku xa ucinizelwa ngowakowenu oyaziyo ixabiso lakho. Lo mcimbi wakwa-Traditional Affairs awumanga kakuhle konke mongameli. Uyafuna ulungiswa. Uyafuna injalo ufuna uchotshelwe nguwe mongameli wena mntu uzawuyazi le nto yakomkhulu. Because kweli xesha ukuthandabuza ungazi uba lo mntu utheni exakwa into ecace ngolu hlobo afuna uyifundiswa. Kuthiwe makude kwenziwe istudy kuyostadishwa into which is glaring in my view. Ngubani umntu angayazi into yakomkhulu? Uba ke akuthe kanti akayazi ufunani ke kwimicimbi yakomkhulu? Lo mcimbi mhlekazi inkosi zingathetha le kuwo zithethe le kodwa ikhona ingxaki kule nto ino-traditional affairs inkulu kakhulu. Is either abantu abayikhathalelanga okanye bafuna izifele ukufa kwendalo. Sozuyibone mongameli obeke kule into yoba kube kumthetho ubhale umthetho uba i-traditional leadership mayicapacitate kodwa ingenziwa loo nto. Kuhlaliwe nje. Iinkosi ziphethe imicimbi yabantu abafundileyo. Ezi zifundiswa zikhoyo elizweni ziphuma ezilalini inkoliso yazo zihlala neenkosi. Uzawuadjudicate kanjani kwimicimbi yezifundisa ungafundanga? Ndicinga fanuba mhlawumbi le nto ingade ivakale. Ndinamasikizi nje mongameli uba sisike qho sithetha kuwe qho yonke le minyaka sithetha kuwe. Andingomntu uthanda ukwenza i-hit and run ezintweni. Bangasike sijongane siqondane uba siyavanana naba bantu bamele ukwenza lo msebenzi kufuneka wenziwe. Uba sivani sikwazi ukuthi masiyeni kumongameli kuba sivani. Ngoku siqala phezulu isingathi kumhlali ngaphambili iyafuna le nto ucwangciseka kakuhle le abaphathiswa uze baphakame babuzwa imibuzo ngento abangayenzanga. Uba babuzwa ndawo kufuneka bawubuzwa ngumongameli kuphela. Yabona xa behlangene apha eParliament baye imibutho ngemibutho kwenixesha kuthi uva laa mntu ubuza into engendiyibuza into nayo uhleli kwesinye isihlalo. Ngoku ke impendulo ke ngoku ingangqamanali into impendulo ibe yeyoba yile nto buhleli kweso sihlalo. Awuyiqondi kakuhle le nto. Uba buhleli ngapha ngoyiqonda. Yabona thina ke sinazihlalo zithenini sawubuza lo mntu ubekwe phambi kwethu le nto sifuna uyibuza. Bendiyicela mhlawumbe ndingayiphinda loo nto kuba ndicinga uba fanuba kukho enye into abamongameli kunto laa nto kuthiwa i-IGR yintoni kanene leyo? Yeke inesizathu laa nto uba yasekelwa ntoni na IGR. Kodwa ungayibuza uba kuphi apha isebenzayo loo nto. Ngoku kukho enye into kuthiwa yi-war room. Ujonga i-IGR ujonge i-war room ukhangela uba hey inoba into efuna ukuchanwa apha ngezi zixhobo yintoni. Phinde phaa kwi-presidents ube ne-coordinating team. Uyakhangela ukuba ezi zinto zontathu mhlawumbi azinakwenzeka uba zenza into enye. Sengathi ke kumhlali ngaphambili Ezusinceda kakhulu lento uzane ne structures ezininzi sakhe isinye emva kwesinye ingathi ke sikhangela ba into le siyiphosileyo kwesokuqala uba siyiphosile ilunga sisichithe singabikho ngexesha elinye nesinye kuba iza kwenza ukuqonda kubantu abanje ngathi kungabi ungaphongomi ndifuna ke uyaphanga sekugqibeleni emhlekazi kulento ne-royal families ndivile pha nyhani ke ziyafuna uqeqesho kodwa ingaske kumke kuqalwe nge-registration yazo kukho into efika ibe yintsomi ufike kwamathanzini ufike kuthiwa kwi-royal families ezimbini axabe urhulumente uba uzawuthatha ilizwi leyiphi singathi ngeke siqale ngokuthi register all the royal families ze-South Africa ukwenza ba xa kukhona into eziza kurhulumente isuka kwi-royal family urhulumente abe nako ukukhangela uba kulolu luhlu le-royal family aba bantu babhale le nto bakhona na angaziboni urhulumente esebhoksa neziporho apha ndiyangqinelana noluvo oluthi masiqeqeshwe kodwa makhe zithiwe register kuqala zaziwe uba zeziphi singathi kanti sawuqeqesha abantu abarongo uyayazi phaa e-Eastern Cape ke kwasuka kwatrainwa iingcibi kanti abantu abaye phaa bayofuna itraining abangomadoda bonke kuye namakhwenkwe atrainwa nawo ezi ingcibi awusebenza lo msebenzi wengcibi isenziwa i-Department of Health law sazayibona leyithi loo nto ngoba sihambe sifaka imfundo uba umntu oyingcibi kufuneka abe njani abantu ngoba be-honest bathi hayi besingayazi nathi sicela uyokoluka ndenza umzekelo ke ngale mandigqibele ke ngokuthi ndazi ke mongameli ba ipokotho kamongameli inzulu kangakanani la malungu alendlu njengoba ubutshile agqiba 20 eminyaka le ndlu yawo xebe yasekwayo kunye ne-constitution of the republic besingenako ukuba ne-celebrations minister celebrate i-constitution yethu egqiba 20 years nendlu yethu egqiba 20 years ikhona binosidla imali eninzi loo nto just to indicate to the people that eSouth Africa khona indlu yenkosi egqiba 20 years urhulumente uyaappreciate loo nto ibe yenye into esizawuke sithi phambi ba siye kwi-elections ke sizidle ngayo so ke nina ke minister nina baya kwi-elections and kuloo nto mongameli bendizawucela uba la malungu alendlu yenkosi ngama-20 andithi 20 qha iphelile iterm ngoku akanazi-pensions akanazi-pensions ndiyazi noba nayo ne-graduate andiyazi noba nayo ne-ex-gratia payment kodwa isicelo sami sesokuba ibingonantoni na into yoba urhulumente awabulele awaphe amathokazi enkomo ilungu lilinye 10 10 heifers plus 1 bull bahambe bayokushumayela emakhaya bethi urhulumente uza nenguquko entsha ufuna ukuphuhlisa imihlambi yethu Ndiyabacelela uhlala ngaphambili.
Thank you very much, Ngagomhlaba Madiba. Maybe let us, I guess we've been seated for long. Let us rise up. Siphelekezele lamazwi wamakhosi nama elders, including Koi and Son. La yakhona abuye kahle singawasa praise. May we all rise while we're still waiting for the president to return.
Yeah. Where you are standing now, cousin? Where you are standing?
Order. Please be seated. Yeah, thank you. Order. It is now time for me to invite the president to respond to issues raised by Amakosi. May I therefore take this opportunity to welcome His Excellency, the President, to address Amakosi to the podium.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair of the National House of the Traditional Leaders, Your Majesties, all the leaders of our people, the traditional leaders who are here, members of this house, Minister of Cogta, Honorable Van Rooyen, and other ministers who are here, and deputy ministers, chairpersons of provincial houses of traditional leaders, president of Contralesa, chairperson of the NCOP, the leadership of the Khoisan people, members of the National Parliament, and members of the provincial legislatures who are with us here. And all other invited guests. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. Firstly, let me express my happiness. I think ever since we started having this interaction when we opened Parliament, during the period that I have been doing this, I think, to tell the truth, is the first time I can say there has been a debate, serious debate of the address by the President. As you'll recall, I have been stressing that let us debate. I think today I've heard inputs that are well researched, that deal with issues in correct context and indeed in some details. Also, as learned people will say, the many the merrier, or the merrier the many, or something like that. In other words, I'm saying because we had more speakers, we could cover more areas that are the concerns of the traditional leaders, but also really to point out certain things in a most direct way. So I'm very happy. I think, in my view, for the first time, we had inputs that were not necessarily lamentations, were really inputs on the issues. And one is then in a position to say, yes, we've heard the traditional leaders, these are the issues. You could also say, what can we do to address these issues? For an example, the
the proposal made by Inkosi Matanzima Mhlekazi that usafisa kubona abaphathiswa bedweliswe apha ewe bedweliswe apha ke baziphendulele ngokwabo. Uyayibona loo nto? I don't think it is difficult to organize such a gathering, which we might find a day, which might not necessarily be the day of discussing the input of the president, but a day just to say there is a come together of the traditional leadership with the ministers so that they can deal with the issues. I for an example, take one point that Inkosi was making, because I've heard about because somebody was complaining in some program in the TV, why are the schools being opened? And somebody was explaining that no, if there are 5 kids, then they are taken to another school. It sounds very simple. I mean, me not knowing the problem, I said, well, because the impression you get is that they're just taken to another school next door. It does not explain the problem that Inkosi has put across very seriously. I'm just saying there are such issues. You might find that people who have taken these decisions don't understand this side of the problem. But if they were here, they will then understand, so that people could do things differently. Because it is not correct that at this time we should say, hayi engathi sihlushwa njengoba sasihlushwa nakuqala. Ngeke sayithanda loo nto kuba leyo nhlupho yayinzima. Kwakunzima gqithi. But thank you for that, and I thought I should emphasize that because it's absolutely important. To me, there are too many issues that the traditional leaders and government ought to be discussing for us to be able to handle the country correctly. So that we don't feel that this is government job, we don't worry about it. Or as Chai was saying, the traditional leaders feel we have nothing to do with the schools because the schools belong to other people. Or they feel, as Inkosi Matanzima was saying, we built this school because there was a necessity that we should have a school here. And somebody's coming and closing it. Now, I'm just saying there are many issues. So we've taken notes, and I'm sure even the department has taken note. But equally, you will appreciate that the issues that we have raised are very many. And I'm hoping that Chair Dabezita, some of the inputs that are written, we could benefit by getting them so that we could look at them and study them and try to address the weaknesses where there are weaknesses. And therefore, a complete response to them could come when we've looked at them. And I would imagine the better post box could be the department, the minister. can be delivered to him, the minister will deliver them to me. Partly because the minister himself will have to deal with a lot that is in the presentations or inputs. Even if you talk about such a possibility of a meeting with other ministers, they would understand what are the concerns and suggestions that the traditional leaders are making. so we could get out of that. I appreciated the sharp criticism of the law advisors. They are called state law advisors. Ukuthi njengoba be-advise iparlamente, yintoni lento bangayi-advise kakuhle, yintoni le wrong phakubo. Kufinyelwa kolwazi lomthetho noma kukonqena usebenza, yintoni ibuya qho kuthiwe ayihambisani nomthetho sisekelo. I think it will be absolutely important. There's a number of issues that Shawe raised, which are in the laws or sections of the Constitution for that matter. So I just wanted to make that request as well, that if they could be put together, these inputs, and then be given to us. I might not be able to deal with all the issues, therefore. This is what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. To say, let us. They are we clearing was by Chao in particular, of the need upon us to unite. And he thought we should, because as somebody was saying, that South Africans seem to be very agitated. They seem to be very violent. They seem to be not having all the respects that you know about us. What can we do together to help ourselves? And this leader that we are remembering resembles or embraced all the values that we need as a country. We need to be united. We need to solve issues by discussing and listening to one another and finding a solution all together. That was his nature. That's how he was. He influenced his organization in such a way that the culture of voting in his organization disappeared. He dealt with issues on the basis of consensus, which was an indication that people were ready to listen to one another, not to fight, not to shout, but to find logic, to find solutions on problems. And I think part of what we are talking about is what kind of things we need to do. If the government is aware that these are the things that worry the traditional leaders, what then do we need to do? He will never sit with a problem without finding a solution. So I believe using him to look at what we need to do probably on a daily basis, but also in our lives. How do we handle ourselves as individuals, as countries, but also how do we handle ourselves as groups in the country. If, for an example, some among us feel our issues have not been addressed, what do we need to do? We need to immediately say, let us address the issues. I am certain there is no issue you cannot find a solution on. And I've always said, we in Africa have a gift that there is no problem we could not resolve historically. That's why we had no prisons. Because if there was somebody who goes wrong, a solution would be found. The fact that prisons were developed is because those who developed prisons is because they couldn't find solutions. So the shortcut, send him to prison. Has not solved the problem. As you know, some of them come out there being now professional criminals rather than less. So, in other words, we are saying South Africans should find a way. And there's an anecdote that I like to tell, that even if a man wanted to kill another justifiably, people had a way to stop it, with him being satisfied that indeed my matter has been dealt with, and the matter will end there. But also carrying. We used to carry a great deal. That is why we would look after our children. Looking after our children was one of the main things. Everything we did was to make our children be protected. That's part of the reason that you hear the point that Gosma Tanzim was making, that you can't have the children growing in the house for the rest of their years in schools. You don't know them. They only come at night to sleep and leave very early. You have no time to participate in their growth. I think that's a point he was just making. So it is important that we can sit and talk about these matters. And the traditional leaders have a role to play. You can't stop them from playing that role. It's absolutely crucial. So thank you very much for really taking that issue also seriously. I think the issue that you have also discussed, which I said I would love you to discuss, is the issue of the radical social economic transformation, so that we can attain the full economic liberation of our people, which has been our mission for more than a century. Because when we fought for freedom, we wanted freedom so that we can enjoy what God gave us, the land and its products, so to speak. It was taken away. Now I know that some people seem to be very shy to talk about the truth. Because if you take the land, you take the very life, what make you to survive. If you talk about three challenges, poverty, inequality, and then unemployment, those are the children of land dispossession. Indlala lisiphetheyo ngoku izalwa kukohluthwa umhlaba wethu esasiphila ngawo. It's a critical point. Now, we've been saying, how do we get back? Now, we say radical economic transformation. Now, I know that people, commentators, say many things about this. And it will never be wrong. It's absolutely correct. And we have tried to explain it, and I think I did explain when I was here. I would like to just say, what do we mean by this in a brief fashion? What do we mean? So that if people say to the traditional leaders, you talk about the radical transformation of the economy, what is that? It's just another slogan. So we said in the State of the Nation address, as we talked, this is important. Because people are asking questions, we have simplified the matter for them to understand in terms of the definition of it as we understand it, of what do we mean. We mean fundamental change in the structure, systems, institutions, and patterns of ownership, management, and control of the economy in favor of all South Africans, especially the poor, the majority of whom are African and women. In other words, we are saying the economy, we must feel it, we must handle it. You are in every country in the world. If you go to China, Chinese are in charge of their economy. If you are in India, Indians are in charge of their economy. Wherever you go. It is only here where the majority, the indigenous, are not. Now, it's a matter that we need to talk about, not to fight people. But at the heart of this is the land question, which again we have talked about. It's absolutely important that some of these issues we keep in mind. If we don't deal with it, and I'm happy that the traditional leaders have dealt with this issue very effectively, and I think we are at one. Uchawa says, one of our leaders many years ago described the problem as a fundamental problem. The land question is central to achieving reconciliation, because how do we have peace and stability when the land is not resolved? So it is one of the central pieces of reconciliation and empowerment of our people so that they can be proud of who they are. They can have dignity. If you are in poverty, you don't even have dignity. This was done deliberately. Now, if we are free, we've got political power, why can't we deal with it? To bring the dignity to ourselves, and without fighting anything. And that's why I said in the State of the Nation address, we urge traditional leaders to work with government and all other sectors in society to bring about fundamental land reforms. It's absolutely crucial. Now, unfortunately, eNCOSI Buthelezi Shenge has left because he seemed to be having some concerns about how we want to deal with this. He likens what we are saying like what the Zimbabweans have done, and that if we go the Zimbabwe route, then it will be a problem. But we are not saying what the Zimbabweans have done. It's a mistaken understanding of what we are saying. Zimbabwe had a different thing. They had, firstly, even Zimbabweans, they had an agreement with the British in Lancaster House about land. And the British did not honor what was agreed, which was, among other things, they will give money so that when land is taken, it will be paid. They did not. And this is what made the things to go out of way in Zimbabwe. So if you just liken the Zimbabwean situation with us without giving the background, I think it's a problem. But in our case, we are saying we must do everything within the law. Precisely because we want to do everything within the law and the Constitution. We are not saying, let us now go and take the land. We are saying, let us amend the Constitution. That is not anything wrong. Constitutions are amended all the time to fix the wrongs. So there is nothing irresponsible about it. There's everything responsible. We are even saying, let us audit the land and therefore deal with the period we did not deal with. And I think, from my point of view, it's correct. We can give evidence about land. I'm sure each one, maybe many of us, have got very specific accounts we could give, where we were removed from fertile land, pushed by force into land that were not productive. And the amount of land that we were given, very small. The population has grown, the land is not growing. And therefore that brings more poverty, more inequality, more unemployment. No one is saying, let us go and grab. No. We are saying, let us do everything within the law. If we don't have the law, or the Constitution does not address it, let us use democratic methods to correct the Constitution so that we deal. You can't have a Constitution that has clauses that makes people remain in poverty. Then that Constitution can't be good. The Constitution must help to make every South African not live in poverty. That's the Constitution we want. It's just a pity that Umtwana left, but we are neighbors. I can always go and have a cup of tea in his house. We could talk about this. So the land question is absolutely an important issue. One of the key grievance of our people is the high crime levels. There are communities where people cannot even walk freely in the streets because of crime. I said so. Crimes such as drug trafficking, robbery, human trafficking, rape, and other horrible crimes. Let's refuse to tolerate crime. We have tolerated it too long. Now, the point we're making here is that it's no longer just a government or police issue. It's a national issue that we all need to come together. We have ideas which we believe we need to talk about. For an example, we think we should work, galvanize or mobilize the entire nation to fight crime. Let us have popular people's committees, street committees, village committees that are anti-crime. So everybody must participate to assist the police. So that we say in our areas, no crime must be committed. We must stop buying stolen goods because that encourages crime. We must find the people who are said to be drug lords. If they are known that they're drug lords, we can't just allow them to leave because when we search in their houses, they hide it somewhere. If they are known, let us have the kind of law that is going to say, if people say we know he sells it, we are able to deal with that. In other words, let us have laws that are not difficult to arrest criminals, that make it easy to arrest criminals. I've gone to police stations as I am going to places. Police complain that they arrest people, people are released by courts. It's a simple matter that we need to deal with. Perhaps it's a government matter. Because it is true. And once they come out, they kill people to kill evidence so that nobody gives evidence in court. You can't say we don't know. What then do we do as a nation? So these are the matters I believe we need to deal with. One of the concerns that people are raising is the issue of people saying, let government manage migration better than we are doing. As a matter we could talk about. I was in one area in KZN at the border. Every border, this is an old age thing, there's a problem. People living along the borders. But if that becomes, in a sense, a place to hide criminals, I mean, they cross cars. You know for the fact that before 1994, the fences were electrified, and it was killing people. And therefore, there was a feeling that, look, let us remove the fence because it's killing people. Because people cross, they are neighbors. But if you do so, you must then have measures to replace what was there, like your electrical fence, etc. These are the matters we say we need to talk to, and many of these areas are, in fact, the areas that are under AMACOS. And therefore, working together becomes absolutely important. As I said, one of the areas that has been raised sharply, I think eNCA Tobojane raised the matter of the matters of the Khoisan people. I think that is an issue that must be put very squarely because, in a sense, for at least one minister, which I think was also mentioned, Minister Ngwinti, has been interacting. Does he need more support? Are we failing to deal with this simple issue? I know that as I was told by the leaders of the Khoisan people, that the current provincial government was not recognizing them, and therefore making it very difficult. Can't we deal with those matters? And therefore establish it as Madiba made the start? I think we can. These are matters that we need to sit and talk. In the process, we can then isolate the difficulties and then find a solution. As I say, there is no issue that a solution cannot be found. Nobody does not know what happened in this area when the colonialists came. Why can't we resolve those matters? I think those are the matters we can resolve. In another sense, now that you have an input that we have normally in this house, that now says there is an input made by the traditional leaders with regard to the matter of the Khoisan people. What do we do? I'm sure these matters will be taken forward and see how far do we go. Otherwise, Chair, I am happy with the debate. I think there is more material for us to work from together and adjust the manner in which we work and then see how far we could go. I must thank you very much for what you have done. I hope the culture of the debate is going to be kept in this manner because it helps. You are well informed about the issues, and therefore your contributions are absolutely crucial. That you have got an opportunity to address government on the matters where you think there are shortcomings, so that we can work together to correct those kind of shortcomings. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm sure we'll meet again, and by the time we meet next year, we should say, on the issues we discussed, there are matters that have been followed, and we have indeed seen some progress. But I would like, always a wonderful thing to be here with you, Your Majesties, and indeed all the traditional leaders. Minister, I would like also to thank you with your team and thank the chairperson of the NCOP, because I know she does go out to areas. She does not just sit in Parliament only. That is to be encouraged. And thank those who are here from other sectors. This is an important one. Any nation is a nation because of what it is. It can define itself, not in terms of other people, in terms of what it is. I think this is a good process. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Let me now invite Nkosi Mahlangu, our Deputy Chairperson, Azuzbongela Mongameli, on behalf of Amakosi Onkala Babanzonzo.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Your Excellency, Honorable President, Amakosi, I firstly, President, want to thank those that raised and congratulate them as well for raising the issues sharply, as you have also intimated that you felt it is the first time that we debated with issues. So I want to thank my team for representing the institution well, and also do say, President, that this is the outgoing house. We are going towards elections as well. So this is the end of our term. Hence the request that was made by Madiba, of which I am sure Gudi Iwelendlebene Ezwin, Mongameli. So we want to thank you for always availing yourself and also for dealing with issues that the institution is always raising, and also on the commitment that the President has made that we will have a platform like this where we'll engage with ministers and discuss these issues that Amakosi have been raising. Mina not Deputy Minister Bapela, it's that time of the year again where it is time for initiation. We'll be crisscrossing the country, trying to resolve issues of initiation. And the biggest question that, President, we've always been asked, and Nkosima Tanzima always asks this question, Oguti, I can see